stand and say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda today is a presentation by ICS Consulting.
Alrighty.
And they want it to be more interactive, so they asked if we could move to the back of the room for that section.
Will the cameras pick it up?
I hope so. We're gonna have a challenge with the microphones, but
Okay.
Tom, can I grab a piece of paper from you? Can I take a piece of paper there? Thanks.
no, that's it. How you doing? Great.
Yep, there's a cup.
So there's room for you.
Oh, I would like to, Christine is coming too, so I gotta make sure there's a chair for her.
Okay.
Okay, I've already got 3 resolutions that I can talk to. Happy about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it didn't switch
it hasn't switched yet, no.
And it might not. Oh, I got to switch it over. One more thing. It didn't work. A little button didn't work.
It's working.
Usually it's operator error, that would be me.
And me.
I'll stand by you then. Misery loves company.
I'll just take the, yeah.
Well, I can get started. Good morning, I'm Jesse Helen, I'm with ICS, and we've been working with Jeff and some of his staff since about the beginning of the year, and we're working on a couple different components. One is facility assessment and kind of inventorying county facilities and their current condition. The other portion is working on a broader view and narrowing some focus and priority that will help us with facility planning and the engine that kicks off the capital improvement plan. So that is where we're at right now. Kind of that second part is this listening session that we're doing today with the board, and then tomorrow as well with department heads to kind of gather that information. We'll pull that all together with the facilities work that we're doing on the other side, and we'll have a deliverable to Jeff here in the next few weeks, but that's kind of where we're at today. I'll turn it over to Glenn Chido and Lynn Dyer. They're going to facilitate today's listening session. We've got a presentation with a lot of this stuff coming up on the screen, and then we'll ask you guys for some input as we get moving. So, thank you.
And, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having us this morning, folks. My name's Lynn Dyer. I've been with ICS 5 years. Prior to coming to ICS, I was a high school business teacher and coach in Thief River Falls for 39 years. And I always tell people it's the best 39 years of my life. I taught financial management, personal law, computer apps. We were a one-to-one school, so I was our building land manager to the network and student computers. Had a chance to come on board with ICS. It was the toughest decision professionally I've ever made in my life. And today I decided to walk out of the closet. I still loved doing what I was doing, but I could see myself transitioning into something like this after I got out of the classroom. To be honest, it's kind of like being in the classroom. You're just facilitating a different group of people. So anyway, thanks for having us. Looking forward to the session.
Thanks. I'm Glenn Chido, and I actually live in Park Rapids, for those of you
don't know. I've been with ICS about 10 years. They weren't ICS when I first came to work for them, but I was in the school district. I was a superintendent prior to Lance Bagstead. So I had been here 10 years before that. But I cut my teeth actually up in Thief River Falls right around the same time Lynn did. I was a teacher, coach up there for many, many years, an administrator. Had one other superintendent gig, so to speak, down in Renville County West, down in southern Minnesota, just south of the Wilmer area. But we had gone through something similar to this back in my day in Park Rapids, and I liked it. I thought it was a good exercise, it was a good process. So nonetheless, when I was ready to retire, they offered me a position, and I've been doing this, and now, of course, Lynn and I have had a chance to work together. We've known each other for 40 years. Our kids graduated together, so it's been kind of a fun ride with that. What we do, and we do a lot of this, is the listening session component. There's one other aspect that, just to tell you, part of what we typically do if we work with school districts, is we will also look at facilities. I don't think we're the ones that are going to be looking at these facilities in this case. It's somebody else. I believe it would be Jason Splett. But nonetheless, that's another part of the process that we generally will work with. Jason is right there, up there in the top corner. Young guy. He's also working. He lives in town. Wife works for the school district. Has kids in the school district as well. What do we do, and what's the typical component of this? We call it listening sessions, but quite frankly, it's more of input sessions. Pretty soon here, I'm going to stop talking as much as I'm talking and ask you questions and hopefully get some feedback from you. But we also, if you take a look at what we do, or the objectives of our listening sessions, we take a look, and Jesse talked about a little bit, assess the current and future facility needs, or future facility needs. We also talk about, and oftentimes sit down with the councils, school boards, whatever it may be, looking at their long-term facility plan. And then the last one, number 3, they're the engagement piece. And that's where Lynn and I come in part, where we will do, and you'll see here in a minute what we're going to go through, but the whole engagement piece with different stakeholder groups. Now, quite frankly, we did this down in Cass, and Lynn and I did this same thing with the city down there in that case. We met with a variety of groups, and we ultimately met with not only the council, the department heads, met with some city groups, community groups, open at large groups, that type of thing. Did the exact same process down there. They were looking at some things as well down there as far as what they want to do for their facility needs. One thing that we have found, and this holds true, it doesn't matter whether we're working with a school, a county commissioner group, or a city council piece, everybody has a different perspective of what is and what isn't, and what's needs and what doesn't need, so to speak. And so what we've done through the process, and we do this on a regular basis, we're going to take this information today, compare it to the information we get tomorrow, and start showing and putting together ultimately results to you of where they align themselves, where your thoughts and about the respective different questions, where they align with the department heads, which will hopefully give you some foundation of where you may want to go, may not want to go, depending on, again, how it lines up and how it lines up with your particular vision. The idea of the Post-it notes, you all have Post-it notes, so you didn't have to bring anything today. We're going to ask you some questions, some open-ended questions. There is no right or wrong answer to anything. We're just looking for your opinion. So in other words, whatever you may think, you give it, we'll ask you to write it on the Post-it note, we'll pick it up, we're going to read it off, put it up on the board, and as soon as we've exhausted a question, then we just move on to the next one. Again, there's no right or wrong. If you can, and if you have multiple responses, then go ahead and write that on multiple Post-it notes. Largely because if in fact you write a theme paper on there, it's a little hard for me to read and hard sometimes for us to interpret. So keep it as short and concise as you possibly can. The other part of this is that if in fact if Dave Delahunt wrote something and someone else was going to or wanted to write the same thing, go ahead and do so, because we also look for frequency. How many times do we see the same response to the same question? So that plays into the data at the end. This is, and we're doing it, I'm going to smile when I say this. What we're doing is kind of the old-fashioned way. Because of COVID, we ultimately had to move like everybody else to a virtual world. So Lynn and I had ultimately perfected a way to work with people using devices and so forth and so on. But in fact, we do the Post-it note, and you can see there, right here in the corner, I guess it doesn't work on the TV, but on the left-hand side there, working with a school district, and Post-it notes are there off to the side. The picture in the middle just happens to be me talking to them about it or going through it. Picture on the right, we have one question that we call pigeonholes a specific area, and it will be a facility question. Lynn's gonna handle that one with you. He'll explain the dot piece of it. I'm not gonna go through it right now, but otherwise, all the other questions are wide open. They're not specific to any one thing as we go through this. So I'm gonna get started here. So again, you have Post-it notes, and please write your response on a Post-it note. You can use the Sharpie that's in front of you. We'll pick it up, and when we've exhausted the question, then we'll just move on to the next. If you don't have a response, hopefully you do, that's largely part of the process, but if you don't have a response, no pressure. But as soon as we get to the point where we think we've gone through the first question, we'll go on to the second, and so on and so forth. There we go. Okay. So let's take a look at, as far as the Hubbard County piece. Tell us, as briefly as you can, but as specific as you can, what are the great things, positive things that are currently going on in Hubbard County? In your opinion, great things. And again, this is anything. It's not just facility related, but it's anything. What are the great things that you feel are going on, things that you would brag about what's going on in Hubbard County in general? Very little debt for the county. Long-term planning, strategic plan, CIP. Great place to live. Workforce housing apartments. Employees are good and desire to service. Anything else? I'm expecting big things out of you. I just want to breaking down the silos. I've been waiting for a long time to be able to say that too. Breaking down silos county-wide. Many people, vacations here, strong equals strong economy. Good place to live and retire. And again, if you think of something after the fact that should have, you wanted to put back in one of the questions, we can always put it back, add it back. It's not a big deal. Long-term planning. New businesses have started, others interested in coming. Anything else? Growth. Growth in what? Okay. Good roads. Things. See, we wanted you all be tight in here, so we didn't have to run so far. I'm on a diet plan, but not that big a diet plan. First word. Lake living in Hubbard. Anything else? All right, let's talk about the next thing. Turn the hourglass over, so to speak. What's our challenges? Is this positive? Not positive? Yep. Yeah. Positive. What's our challenges that we face in Hubbard County? When they say we, I mean the county as a whole, from workforce. Challenges. Housing, affordable housing. Childcare. Never any battle for almost any community. Did you know all the questions beforehand? And I could just as well stand right here. Heritage Living Center. Qualified workers. Long-term nursing facility concerns. Home in the need of repair. Creating community buy-in in long-term plans, nursing home, homelessness.
I think whoever wrote home and need a repair, are you talking about, people needing repairs and can't afford them? I don't know who wrote that. Yeah.
That was the thing.
Old courthouse use. Usually I set that down, but I can't
Oh,
find
I
it.
have one.
Either that or it's in my pocket and all of a sudden the slides are clicking. That's what it was. Court facility, more space for future needs, distance to programs for those in need, and rising population in jail. Anything else?
Could I add one thing for great things?
Absolutely. Oops. County lease vehicle garage. Inflation. This is on
That's
the-
under great things.
Great things, good stable tax base. Anything else? Oh, there you go. Clicked it too fast. Lottery question. You won the lottery. Here's the deal, you gotta spend it, you're gonna walk in one of the next meetings you currently have. You're gonna say, folks, we really need to do this. Here's the check, money's no object, what are you gonna spend it on? Won the lottery. Ask-
The board doesn't agree with me, but I'm putting it up there anyway.
Pay off all debt. Youth Athletic Center. Gotta spend it on the county. What are you gonna spend it on? It's amazing when we throw this question in here, how many people, they pause, because I don't know if they've got so many things in their head, they don't know which one to write down. Economic tool to help all county entities prosper.
I'm thinking about my district. Will count in one respect.
Oh, it's okay.
I wanted to pay off your deep debt.
I'm working on it, I'm getting this out of it.
Yes, you are.
Business growth. Protect and grow tax base while keeping taxes low. Housing rehab grants and loans for lower income. We run out of post notes, we got plenty. Don't you know that?
This could be for challenges also.
Okay. The conservatory, conservation, excuse me, fund.
Plans?
You want that on the challenge or not? It's up to you.
Put it on the challenge.
Okay.
Okay.
Revolving loans for businesses. Solid waste improvements. Anything else? I got so many stories, you're supposed to know, so it's time. closing south transfer station, demo landfill. Anything else?
Improve the new one.
There you go. Development a specialty court.
No, especially.
Oh, for crimes?
Oh, okay. All right. Anything else? Vision. Here's our visionary question, 10 years from now. What do you want people to say about Hubbard County? What would you hope that they would say about Hubbard County 10 years from now? Great place to raise kids. Great place to live, work, play, and retire. Absolutely. Stable, low debt ratio. Business friendly, great place to retire. Great place to work, play, and raise a family. Strong strategic plan and capital, strong, stable county. Good health facilities.
This is another one for kids.
Okay. Great jobs. Back on the positive, smart and good-looking county board.
That's a vision.
I was trying to do it with a straight face and it wasn't gonna work. Just wasn't gonna work.
But you said you were a school teacher.
Yeah, I know,
Is there one in every class?
yeah, yes, there is. Trust me, there is. And usually they stand out real quick. You always know who they are. Solid, well-run county government. Housing available for all income levels. Anything else on the lottery question? Vision, excuse me. I'm back on the lottery.
The roads, you want that one back up?
Infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead, Ted, you write that up. Oh, I have one. That could include in that broadband,
This is the infrastructure.
yeah, and can we put broadband on there? That would include.
That way nobody can say that I put the answer. All right. Infrastructure broadband for all areas and a sustainable county structure and planning. Anything else? Okay, this is the facility question. Hold off before you start writing. Mr. Dyer will walk you through this one, and I'll just turn it over to him, and he can go ahead and explain what we're doing.
All right, so for this one, what we'd like to do is kind of make a laundry list of your thoughts, where you see facility needs within your county. We're gonna make a list, and then we're gonna use that list for prioritization. Okay? So as you look across your county, where do you see, or what do you see as your greatest facility needs? Improvements, updates, changes, whatever. Just call those out, and I'll put them on our list, and then we'll go through a prioritization. What do we think?
The landfill situation, Ted talked about.
Okay?
Yeah, new demo window.
Okay?
And going along with that, closing, having money to cover the cost to close the area that needs to be closed.
And close the old? Is
Yeah.
that, okay? All right. What else?
Last time I walked through the old jail facility, it was still sitting all vacant and unused, so that's wasted space.
Okay,
What to do with it, how to remodel or whatever.
okay.
We need to raise
Remodel
the-
or utilize?
assess.
repurpose, or assess it to see if it can be repurposed, or
Okay.
demo.
Okay,
It's,
so
it's dead space.
evaluate the current, would that be the current jail? The
Old.
old.
Yo, go.
The old.
Yeah, let's not bring that up.
Oops. For use or demo, does that capture your thought?
And demo, then, you know, maybe something else can go, a new building can go in its place.
Right, okay. All right,
And then also, like, I'd say, what to do with the courthouse, the old courthouse,
okay.
just, if we can have other uses for it.
So is that again an evaluate type of situation? Okay.
Kind of as part of that old jail thing too, is part of the problem with that over there is we have our corrections is located over there, and part of our courts. So with that, you'd have to evaluate those spaces too and see what you do with that. So you could just put court system, evaluate court
Courthouse,
system.
so,
Oh, that's all, but
Could
you're
be
talking,
different.
yeah, 3 is this building over to your left?
yep,
Yep, okay, and then
Make it
Dave
a
is
4.
talking about
make it a 4.
something different.
Okay,
Current court facilities.
so evaluate the current court facilities. Okay.
Part of looking at facility is to determine the way the world has changed, how much room we actually need for people to come here in person, what can be done remotely.
This was jail to, I'm sorry,
Yep.
in jail? Court facility / jail, just court facility.
Yeah, Dave is saying it's housed in the old jail, part of it, right?
It could be, or it could be done separately too.
I just wanna make sure
The
that,
old jail, that's-
Yeah, because we're at capacity, we're almost at capacity in our jail.
right, yeah, that seems to be a county problem over there
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, definitely issue. I just wanna make sure that whatever wording I put this in, that it's your words and I don't change the meaning of it. So is this,
I would make it a separate thing and just look at number 5 being evaluate jail facility. It was built separate from everything else.
as a 5th item?
So you want to look at their current jail?
I think you're gonna
Yeah,
have
But
it at some point.
Corey had mentioned to us not very recently that design, not by the one who actually used it, maybe by the sheriff, and, you know, it didn't have that opening.
I know, but there's
Area.
federal standards
Yeah, there's a
that they had to
couple,
adhere to that they.
he mentioned in an email, there's a couple, there's only a couple of jail cells that are specialty cells that, for people you can't put in the regular population, and they're full. And we don't
So-
have enough.
So is what you're saying is evaluate the design and use of the current jail?
Not so much that, but you might be having to look at expand and create some more.
Design use and value goal.
Use and design of jail, for expansion? Or,
How about and possible expansion?
and possible? Okay,
Before you flip,
Yep.
on number 1, Ted, were you just worried about the south transfer station, or didn't the north transfer station have some, they both tie in together kind of?
They kind of both tie together, and there is the thought about, because of the availability of county lands, but at the north transfer station, maybe
Right.
thinking of demo landfill up there.
So you would be looking at, on the south transfer station here in Park Rapids, potentially closing a landfill, and then at the north transfer station, potentially a new landfill and a facility improvement to handle it.
okay. Does the way this is worded for your purpose capture those thoughts? Because this is your list. And as long as you understand what's up here.
It probably would, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the way it's stated there, new demo landfill and closing the old landfill, I guess is kind of broad.
Okay? So I'll make sure that it's,
Yeah, once you explore it, I think it'll go that direction anyhow.
right. As long as everyone in the room that's prioritizing understands the way it's worked, that's all.
And then there was some talk about, because we have an enterprise rental fleet, of having a garage to keep those vehicles.
Okay?
That's another one, is that the Public Works facility?
Okay?
And then there's always been some discussion about repurposing space in here to be more efficient, better utilized.
Okay. That's all right. Is that to maximize use? Is that kind of the purpose, repurpose the space in current county facility?
Yeah, because, you know, over the, going through COVID and stuff, things have changed how people work.
Exactly. Yep, very well.
So that goes,
you know,
that goes along with mine, we need
Yeah.
to decide
The debate is, do
what
we
kind of,
have,
what kind of space do we actually need?
do we need more space, or do we have adequate space if it's repurposed?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Some of that might change a lot because of remote working.
Sure. Yep, exactly. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Facilities within the county?
Well, going back to that, the last one there about repurposing space, I'm thinking not only in this building, but if the building next door, all the buildings that we talked about, the jail, the old courthouse next door, this building, even Public Works, if maybe they can be redesigned or whatever, maybe we don't need to build them, we just need to change how it.
Sure. Would it be fair to say that when we use that word evaluate, the jail, the old courthouse, or the current court facility, would that capture that thought?
I think so.
Would the evaluation be part of determining use and if it's, used to its maximum?
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're talking about the county as a whole, and those are talking about specific departments in the county, so I think we should have a number 8.
Okay, fair enough. And how do you want me to word that?
Do we want to evaluate current county buildings to see if they can be redesigned to eliminate the need for future buildings?
Or, again, for maximum use or for,
Something like that?
okay? Or for meeting expectations of needs?
There you go.
All right?
Number 9, fuel facilities on there because there was some concern with those. It turned out to be okay, but it's a shared fuel facility with the school district and everything, and it's, long-term is gonna have to be looked at, whether it stays or it's redone or what we might do with it.
For use and need? Is that fair?
Yeah. That could be one or the other.
Okay.
It just depends.
Future needs?
It's discovered.
Okay, future needs,
Number 10.
all right. See, he gets paid by the post-it notes, I get paid by the
Oh, okay.
facilities.
Some more
So you guys
So
are.
I'm doing really well
you're
so far.
helping me get some gas money and get back to Thief River. Yeah,
The county will be acquiring some land, Beltpack property,
okay,
and that's gonna take a significant amount of funds.
so,
So there'll probably be grant money available, but
okay.
how much, we don't know.
So create a plan for development of new land? Is that,
Well, for development of Delta Tech, you can do what's gonna be called Deep Lake Park.
deep, like,
Yeah, Deep Lake Park.
deep, DEP?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Anything else?
Yeah, we didn't even have heritage on there, did we? Gotcha.
Oh, heritage is under, our
But that's a
challenges.
facility too.
Okay, so.
Well, why don't you
we
just
have-
put heritage as question marks, because we don't even
Yeah.
know what we're gonna do with it.
Yeah.
So, what, heritage?
Heritage is our long-term nursing facility that's,
Oh, okay.
we basically own buildings.
Okay.
On different buildings.
Okay, so,
We have to, we're in the process of possibly engaging a broker here and trying to figure out what all our options are with it.
okay,
So we're actually right in the middle of the process, but it would fit in there as a discussion point anyhow, because it's gonna affect a lot of different things.
so it's kind of the long-range plan for the care facility?
Yeah, if you shed $10 million worth of bonds, it makes a big
Yep.
difference on the rest of that list.
What do you call it?
Heritage.
Okay. Anything else? Good list. Anything else? Want to be respectful of your time, but I want to make sure we get your thoughts. Going once, going twice. All right. So here's what happens next. Okay, just like in real life, you can't have everything. If you folks are accustomed to this, you have to make priorities. Okay, you only have so much money, you can only do so many things. So now off this list of 11 items, we're gonna give you 7 dots. We intentionally give you less dots than options to choose. Okay? Now, don't worry about the color of the dots. The dots all have the same value. But here's the rules for the dots. Number one, you can only use 1 dot per line item. Okay? So you can't go up there and have one of your items be your favorite and put all 7 of your dots on one line. You look at a story.
It's happening, it's happening.
We got-
That's why we're saying, it's happening.
Yeah, we got a couple good stories. Okay, number 2, you don't have to use all your dots. If there's only 5 things up there you're passionate about, you don't have to put all 7 dots on the board. You can take 2 of your dots and just keep them. Okay, number 3, you can't sell them, you can't give them away, but you could take them home. Okay? So, I'm gonna let my partner tell the dot story because, you know, being a former superintendent, you know, he's really a good storyteller.
Yeah.
So I'll let him tell me about this.
We were in Staples, Motley. We were working with the district, school district. Mr. Dyer is from Staples, okay?
I graduated from St. High School.
So, we happened to be in Motley, though, we were meeting with a community group one day. There was a gentleman in the crowd who challenged just about everything I said. Now, I said the same stuff I said here today, so I'm not sure where he would challenge it all, but nonetheless, he challenged me all the way through. So we get to this exercise right here. We went through the whole spiel, you can't put them all on one line, da-da-da. So I stepped back, we had quite a few people, 20-some people in the room. So I was in the back, and I honestly don't stand on people's shoulders to see if you cheat. But nonetheless, all of a sudden, 2 ladies, they beelined right for me. And I'll say his name was Charlie. Charlie cheated. I said, what, you mean Charlie cheated? He put all of his on one line. So I'm looking over this maze of people, and I said, Charlie, did you cheat? No, I didn't cheat. Okay. So then very next week, true story, we're standing in Staples. We got a room full of about 30-some people. There's a guy here in the back, and he raised his hand. He said, are you gonna throw those results out for Motley? Well, why would I do that? Because Charlie cheated. And now it's time, what do I say in front of 30-some people that Charlie cheated? And finally, I made a couple of comments and I said, well, how would you know that? It was in the newspaper. The newspaper lady was at Motley, and she wrote,
From the Staples world.
she wrote it in the newspaper. Didn't use Charlie's name, but everybody knew it was Charlie. So, our goal is, and that's why we say, please don't cheat. And don't tell us that you ran out, or here's another typical one, I forgot where I put my dots. No, you didn't, you only got 7. So take a look at this, and this is very unofficial, folks, it's just your priority, what you think should go to, it doesn't mean that whatever doesn't get a dot, or whatever gets less dots, doesn't mean it's not important. It just means how you're looking at those things. So please, go ahead, put your dots up there. Not one bit.
No difference.
No difference.
All same value.
Yeah, all have the same value.
Just that we ran out of one, and we got more of the other.
We used to do that though, and we got away from that too, because that was a kind of a circus, having different values for different colors. Yeah, I actually just got a text, said, where are you? I'm supposed to be at a meeting over at the school. Oh.
This could be a ICS repurpose space for maximum.
Yeah, when you get down to your last few, huh?
7 and 8 are kind of the same stage.
Wow.
Yeah, you do. Well, I'm here for the one after that.
Yeah.
Well, I think this one's a good one. The city, the interesting thing is the last city.
So Jason's board, he typically will either be there or sometimes he'll walk out there. That's one of the things. I don't know if this would be good. It's simple. Council is going to last piece.
They're all just
The other
single
cities are
person.
single person.
Okay. They're,
Yeah. Exactly, but depending on far away it is.
Oh, no, it was like 50 years ago.
Yeah, no,
So when I came.
I kind of use,
all right, look at that.
Was a sister to.
Seriously, came right up to me, got right up in my face. On my mic, so the principal's on. I didn't know this was the craziest thing I've ever seen. All right, here we go. We got one question left. Now, just full disclosure, now tomorrow, when Lynn and Jason actually will be doing that session, when they meet with the department heads, they will ask them, what's your advice? But we never generally don't ask the board, if you will, the commissioners in this case, what to give yourself advice. But what's your expectations of this process? And look at the process in its totality. What's your expectations, we'll say, from ICS? What is your expectations of all of this? Listening sessions, evaluate facility. What do you hope or want to get out of that?
This goes back to the post-its.
Yes, I'm sorry. Apologize. You put it on a post-it note, we'll pick it up. again, the department heads will get the exact same questions except for this one. They will get an advice question. Expectations. Develop a roadmap for long-term needs and use of county facilities. Come up with a plan to proceed with 5 to 10 year facility planning. Guidance on priorities on how to move forward for maximizing results with good dollar decisions. Best use of county facilities. Anything else? Anything else on the expectation piece?
There's no problems in public economy, so.
Perfect. That's our goal. It's lofty, but that's our goal. Quite frankly, this process has been used multiple times, and I can tell you in the 10 years I've been with it, I've been in Philadelphia, North Dakota, South Dakota, a little bit in Wisconsin, using the exact same process, and it's not about me, but the process has helped a lot of different entities figure out some things that, you know, either they didn't know, or it validated what they already did know, and those kinds of things, which was pretty important to the overall future of things. Any other pieces for this?
I was just thinking the same thing.
What we do now then is that we'll take this information and then we'll put it together. We put together all the frequency pieces of it, and that becomes the report, for lack of better terms. We don't pull anything out of there. If it's isolated, if it's a one-time thing, fine, it's still in there, but we look now for that frequency within this group. We'll do the same thing with the department heads then. Then we show, or we look for the alignment. Where do the department heads' responses, your responses, where do they align themselves? Same thing with the facility thing. So we'll ask them, same question. They may have 11, they may have 3 or 4. We don't know. We never predetermine how much or how big that list is. But they'll go through the same process, of which then again we put that together and we show the alignments, which ultimately comes back to you, along with the other assessments that are currently being done or will be done on your facilities. I believe Jason's doing that, isn't he? Yeah, Jason Splett will be handling that part. So that's where all of this comes together. That's the usual and normal process, of which then obviously you guys start analyzing things and see where you think you want to go. Maybe it validates what you're already thinking. Maybe something shows up that you didn't realize. But what I think the key thing, and what always seems to be the key thing, is the alignment piece. How closely are you aligned with other stakeholder groups, in this case it would be your department heads, with your thought process? And how does that help develop an overarching vision of what you want to do and where you want to be, kind of thing. Questions for us? And I'm gonna scoot really quick, because I'm supposed to be at a meeting at the school. I was supposed to be there at 9 o'clock, so, I'm gonna head out. Lynn and Jesse will stick around. Yeah. Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. Good input. Very good. Yep. All right, if there's nothing else, any more questions? I always hate it when nobody asks him a question, because he always thinks he does such a fabulous job when people don't ask questions.
I heard that, Lynn.
I do have a question, so when will we see, as you gather information and then evaluate it, when do you report back?
I guess I'm going back to Jesse. You have the timeline?
Yeah, we're in the process. This will be put together at the same time as our facilities data gets put together, and we're looking at having that wrapped up by the end of March.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And we'll work through how we present that or what that deliverable looks like. You know, we'll have that data get sense to you by the end of March.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.
That same PowerPoint will be used tomorrow, so I can just stay here with you.
Yeah, the only thing we'll do is we'll hide that expectations, and maybe I can do that now. And beside the expectations, bring up the
Yeah.
Nice question.
Interesting things we put on there. Didn't get any
Want us to
Traction.
rearrange or leave this for tomorrow?
for now.
I'll take care of the
No, that's okay. I'll
We'll,
put that
we'll
back.
move the tables back.
Yeah, just put it back. It's,
It's just that might be background noise. Maybe take 5 minutes and get out of there.
it's not, you know what? I feel-
The ring uppers are just a single.
One's a video and one's a PowerPoint.
Okay, how much did you want?
Let's do the PowerPoint. Do you want me to hand these over?
Yeah, you certainly can.
Look at that, fancy.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm gonna speak with you maybe, as that Straight River Township, that's in your area, right?
What's that?
Straight River? Who's that? Oh, you just be the lucky winner. I'll have a conversation with you. I was there last night. I heard some interesting things. Nice to see you. Love you here. Thanks. All right. Do you advance the slides to me now?
I can.
You know when you're ready, here we go.
We're ready when you're ready.
All right. Hi. Line 3 is done. Line 93 is in service. So what I have today is just a quick recap of some of the things that are highlights from the project. There's a handout that I gave you, it's also on our website, that captures the highlights of this presentation. So afterwards, if you want to take a look at this, it'll capture it. Do you want me to sit down here by the mic? Is that better?
If you could, that'd be better.
Okay, super good. All right, how's that? Better?
You don't have to put that one right in front of you, so that's okay.
Okay.
That'll be fine.
All right, so I suppose I should introduce myself for that. Christine Davis, Enbridge Community Engagement. So let's dive into it and we'll go through this slide deck. What I like about it is it shows pictures of construction. We weren't out in the field to see it, so we can, see what happened when Line 3 is being built. You want to go on to the next slide? Well, so we always start with a safety moment, and because we have a new line in service, 811, call before you dig. We are in new territory with folks, so just want to make sure that people know that if they're doing any digging around our pipelines, they need to call 811 before they start doing that. Go ahead, you can move forward. In Minnesota, we've got 340 people that work for Enbridge, and you can see some of the other numbers. The property tax from 2020 is on there too. You can just move forward, we'll keep on going. All right, here's where I want to start digging into it, because this is where it gets fun in Minnesota. So we have 8 new pump stations that were put on the new line. Oil moves at about walking speed, so we need pump stations to continue to move that oil along. Of the 8, there's 1 in Hubbard County in Clover Township. We call it 2 inlets. So that's where that pump station is located. There's also 2 pipeline maintenance shops that are in the new to Enbridge portion of the route. That's the dotted green line. One of them is here in Park Rapids near the airport. And the other one's in Hill City in Aiken County. If you look at this map, the orange line is where our existing route was and where our main line is. Number of pipelines that are up there, they go through Varden and Helga Township here in Hubbard County, and then the new line 93, as it's called, because, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but new line 93 goes along that dotted line. Most studied pipeline project in Minnesota history. We had the Minnesota regulatory process, the U.S. regulatory process, and then we also worked the tribes as far as gaining the permits that we needed to cross their tribal lands. Can go to the next one. Here's a representation of all the places that we were and things that we heard. So the map of Minnesota with the dots represents every public meeting that took place. There were 71 of them. So public comment was taken at all those meetings, and it changed and adjusted the project numerous times. The bottom bullet there talks about 320 route modifications that were made based on stakeholder input. Some of them were pretty significant, some of them were smaller. What I mean more significant, in the western part of Hubbard County, our lines follow the MnCAN or the Coke pipelines, and we made an adjustment that was pretty significant to avoid the watershed where White Earth has their most important wild rice lakes. On the southern part of the county, originally we were going to go sort of parallel with the power line all the way across the southern portion of the county, but we made an adjustment due to DNR input to drop into Adena County instead. On this slide, we talk about the fact that we had so many private landowners. Every one of them we worked with and got easement agreements to cross their land. We had 90 resolutions of support, and we had more than 4,000 meetings like this where we talked to elected officials, city councils, chambers, civic organizations, one-on-one meetings with people in coffee shops, just a lot of input that we got. Probably saw a lot from Minnesotans for Line 3 over the summer in particular, but there were supporters for this project in every one of the counties in Minnesota. Folks who either signed petitions, sent postcards in, wrote letters to the newspaper, put up yard signs, just a ton of really great support for the project, strongest, closest to the project as well. So tribal engagement was a critical part right from the beginning. We were consulting with the tribes when we were designing the route, and there was, in addition to our Western science, the Fond du Lac Band led a tribal cultural survey. They looked at it with their own perspectives, their knowledge of the land, and we made a number of route adjustments as based on that, about 60, I believe, that were made based on what they found and saw along the route. We also had a number of training programs that we were able to increase our workforce and have about 7% of our workforce was tribal members. Go on to the next slide. So we got the approvals we needed to build this project and started it in December of 2020. And I want to talk just a little bit about what you see on this slide because it's kind of interesting. The picture on the big picture is of pipeline construction. Those are welding shacks. So that's what those little pieces are, where they are inside and doing the welding on the line. The bottom left picture is one that I'm particularly proud of. We did an exercise called the Safest Way, and we brought portions of the pipe to different locations along the route and had people sign that pipe. And so we did it over at the Come On In Park Rapids. We had quite a few people over there, probably about 100, that got to sign that piece of pipe. And that is in the ground now, transporting crude oil. It was put into a place near the Wisconsin-Minnesota border. So all those signatures on that pipe are now, they're out there. It's in the ground. So that feels really good to me, and was a part of the community building that we wanted to try and achieve. We had a human trafficking prevention program that was really important to make sure that our workers received the training they needed to be more aware of the problem that exists in Minnesota and elsewhere, and to give them the tools that they needed to identify it, to report it, and to make sure it had the priority that was that was very much needed for it. Go on to the next one. Also, this project was built during COVID, so there was so much work that went into the COVID protocols, whether it be the daily, we had to all check in whenever we were on the route every morning. Before people got to work, they were tested. They were tested multiple times during the process, and there were so many pieces of our COVID protocol that just never had been part of a construction project before, but was really critical to making sure that we're, safe with our workers and in the communities where we're building the line. Here's some before and after pictures. It's always fun to look at these. And also the numbers of workers. So we had almost 12,000 different workers that worked on line 3 at one point or another. It was 10 million hours of work that went into building the project. At the peak in February, we had 5,500 workers. We took a break for spring road restrictions and then started up again in summer. And at that peak, it was about 4,600, of which you can see 7% were Indigenous workers, Native American members. And then we have 20 new permanent positions, of which 6 of them are here in Park Rapids at our pipeline maintenance shop by the airport. And there's also some that are at the pipeline maintenance in Hill City as well, and then others that are responsible for the line. Here's just a quick breeze through of what construction looked like. The upper left picture is of mats being put in to protect the land, clearing and grading the land, and then putting those mats down with that truck, lifting a mat and putting it down to protect the soil. The pipe was, in town for quite some time, and we delivered it to the sites, and we strung it out where we're going to build it. The little, on the bottom right-hand picture, you can see it's erosion control devices that were put in place to make sure that that which was in the construction area stayed within the construction area as far as silt and dirt and whatnot. Can go to the next picture. Here, upper right is pipe being lowered into the ground, quite an operation. They move very quickly as far as getting the pipe lowered into the ground and then covered up with dirt, and then you can see the restoration. That's after, and you can see on this picture, the bottom right, it says line 93 on the pipeline marker. So line 3 is the old line. It's still in the ground. It's been completely purged of oil. It's been cleaned. We'll be in the process of doing further deactivation, decommissioning efforts with that line. But right now, all that oil is out of there. It's been completely cleaned. I've seen some pictures. It looks almost like a new pipe. There's nothing in it. So line 3 is out of service. Line 93 is in service. That's the new pipe. Our regulators provide the numbers for the pipeline. There's no rhyme or reason. They've got their own system, but we've got new line 93 is what I wanted to mention. Here's pictures of the facilities that were built, the pump stations. So this is what it looks like in Clover Township. You probably noticed this is not Clover Township. This is further up the route, but it was very similar at the different sites as far as the big white cover that was put over the construction site so they could continue to build the pump station. And then you can see a little bit of what it looks like on the inside. That's another picture of the terminal down below. But I think the importance is that the pump stations are used to keep oil moving along the route. So here's that picture of another pipeline marker and the restoration work that was done on line 93. It's transporting oil right now to Clearbrook and to Superior, and the old line 3 is out of service. And so here's all our phone numbers, and that's the end of this presentation. If you have any questions or if you've heard anything you want me to know about, I'm happy to answer those now.
Weren't landowners given the option to have old line 3 removed?
Yes.
Or how much of it was removed?
We haven't done any of that yet. So there's a program called Landowner Choice. It was part of one of our permits. And as part of that, the private landowners themselves can choose whether or not they want to have the pipe removed from their land or keep it on their land. Most of them have chosen to keep it on their land because it'd be another construction project on their land again. And so most have chosen to keep it in there. We have not started that work. We completed the construction in October, and the first phase of decommissioning will be more of just specific location valves and pump stations, and then we'll later get to that as needed.
If there is a removal part, do you cap the end off or something?
Yes.
Like that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so in fact, at different roads and different places too, they'll be cut and capped. So say we've got an old valve, the pipeline will be cut there, it'll be capped and closed off, and that infrastructure, will be removed or dealt with. And so, yeah, it'll be capped at different places along the route. Mm-hmm.
So Christine, you had, drop points all over the county where you had stored things.
Mm-hmm.
Did you purchase that, or were you just leasing those properties? If you purchased them, will they be going back on the market?
So many of them are leased, And, those folks had arrangements made with them for the leasing. And then there were some properties that were purchased, and Enbridge is in the process of evaluating each piece of land. Some of them are for sale, and others are in a different timeline. So, yeah, depending upon, it's property specific. In fact, I just got a question about a piece of property from one of the townships. Jason, I think it's from Ergo Township, asked me about a property, and that one is not on the market yet. So that's a evolving situation. One of the pieces of property you know about, Shar, was purchased by Enbridge, and we had Todd and Leon who worked at the office down on 2nd Street. They chose to move from further south in Minnesota, and they ended up just buying that place. So now that's their permanent home. So they're a couple of, workers that are working out of their home now in that township. But that was one of the pieces of property that was purchased to build it, and they just decided to stay. It's a beautiful piece of property. Any other questions? All right, then I've got a thank you. So if you want to play the video, we'll see if the words match the audio. If they don't, we'll cut it off towards the end because it gets to be.
Construction is done.
The Line 3 replacement project is done. Construction is complete on a new and safer pipeline that will deliver the North American energy that we all rely on every day. It is the safest way and is done thanks to the support and hard work of thousands of people. I'm humbled by the effort and grateful for every single voice of support and every hour of labor put into this project. Thank you.
Thank you to communities for hosting our workers and for everyone that voiced their support. Thank you.
Construction is done. The facilities are complete thanks to the amazing workforce that we've had on the Line 3 replacement project. Thank you.
This wouldn't have been possible without all of you and the support of communities, unions, and landowners.
I'd like to say miigwech and thank you to the more than 700 Indigenous people that worked on replacing Line 3 in Minnesota. The participation from tribes in Minnesota and Indigenous people on this project was unparalleled, and your participation led to a safer project and one that better protects tribal cultural resources in Minnesota.
Line 3 has been replaced.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who supported this project.
Miigwech and thank you for working on Line 3 replacement.
To all of our supporters, the communities, landowners, workers, and tribal partners, thank you.
From all of us at Enbridge, thank you.
Thank you!
So there you go. And you've probably heard me say that I, report through Duluth. Lorraine, who was in that video, who did the big thank you at the end and started, is who I have reported to these last 8 years. So with that, I have one last thing. There are some pictures that were in that video that are captured in this plaque. And so this is a plaque that provides a few things. It's the map of the route in Minnesota. This is one of those pump stations being built with the white cover over it and that piece of equipment being dropped in. And then the line going into the ground here. And then remember when I talked about the line being signed and the signatures, a picture of that piece of pipe being lowered into the ground at the border. And then it says on here, Line 3 replacement project in Minnesota, 337 miles, 13 counties, $4 billion private investment, the largest privately funded construction project in Minnesota, creating thousands of family-sustaining construction jobs, December 2020 to October 2021, which is the period of time that, we were in construction in this area. So I'd like to present this to the county if you guys want it. I don't, it's something you can have, and there you go.
Thank you. We'll have to find a place to put it.
Yeah. All right.
So Christine, where are you off to now?
So a couple of different things. You know, we did mention that there's still decommissioning work that's going to be taking place, so we're going to support that as well. I work for Enbridge as their client of mine, I'm a consultant, and so we have other projects that we do for them in other parts of the country too. So we're looking forward to supporting them in other places. And then also at my company, we do a lot of different work too. So I'll still be around, still available for questions, and the website is on here. The phone number's at the end of that presentation. But yeah, I hope to still be around.
It's been nice to work with you, thank you.
Thank you. It's been nice to work with you guys too. Thank you for everything. It's been a pinch me moment, and you know, when it finally was under construction and now that it's built, I mean, it kept on moving so far out, and to actually have it done is quite, I don't know, it's just satisfying, I guess.
Thank you again.
Okay, thanks, guys. I'll leave this behind, and here's your box. Yeah.
Okay, next on today's agenda is the drug paraphernalia proposed ordinance.
You want to sit back? You don't have to come up, Corey. I'll jump right to it so we can move along here. Today obviously is a work session, so the issue is whether or not to look to getting this ordinance passed in the future. It's whether or not the board is interested in this ordinance. So let me start at the beginning. I, as you probably know, am a member of HIP, nonprofit organization, on that board. The HIP's main goal is to prevent childhood use of alcohol, non-prescribed controlled substances, and other substances. So we, in this ordinance, and I apologize, I'm feeling a little under the weather today, so I apologize. This ordinance really, when it was initially looked at, it was trying to just make it illegal to have paraphernalia. And the problem with that, of course, is that paraphernalia itself can be legal. There's a lot of items that are legal that can be used as paraphernalia. So this ordinance regulates paraphernalia instead of making it illegal. I think that at the end of the day, if the state down the road also makes marijuana legal, which is possible here in the next couple of years, then we will have an ordinance in place here to regulate that and regulate the sale. The main issue for me, and the reason why I'm putting this forward is, as an ordinance, is to have an ordinance that regulates the sale of paraphernalia. A drug shop, or not a drug shop, that's not the right way to say it, a paraphernalia or a head shop in the county to where they need to get a license to be able to move forward and actually sell what they're selling. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions. My recommendation here today for the board, and I guess I'm looking for a consensus, is to get a committee together, because one of the issues has to be whether or not or who is gonna be the licensing authority. Whether or not that's the auditor's office, environmental, or some other department in the county, and whether or not the board wants to move forward at all on this. So, questions?
One question. This is paraphernalia ordinance, so if the state does come along and approve use of recreational marijuana, that means we would probably have to revisit an ordinance just for that alone.
We would, and in this, if the board is looking at doing this type of an ordinance, this would be a good placeholder, I guess is the best way to say it, to be able to amend. Yes.
I have several comments.
Sorry.
The first I'm gonna make is Dan isn't here, but Dan is also a member of HIP. And, speaking of where the board stands, Dan is in favor of an ordinance, I believe. I don't know what he would think of this one, but I just state that. Speaking for myself, I don't know if any of you were in attendance at AMC. This was pre-COVID, where they had the 3 county commissioners.
That was there.
State of Washington, I think it was Oregon, and then Colorado. And they all lived in counties where things had become legalized before they were reactive instead of proactive. And the one thing I remember them saying is, be proactive, because if you're not, this has the opportunity to ruin the climate of your county. And they talked about homelessness, they talked about the dirty money, they talked about just, Corey's talked about how you enforce this, and even, they talked about people were tested, and then it took months to even get a test back because the places that testing were so far behind. So I am in support of getting an ordinance in place. I have a question, Jonathan,
Yeah,
on
go ahead.
why you decided 25%. The facility had to sell 25% to require a permit. I
Sure.
have 3 questions, and then I didn't see anything on there as far as distance away from schools, churches, candy shops, etc. And then on page 7, I actually have a specific question. If you could scroll up, Jeff, to page 7. That's 8. So, okay, and number 4, I didn't understand this. To a person who is under 18 years of age or who is at least 3 years younger. What does that mean? Who is at least 3 years younger?
I'm just pulling, all right, so I'm on the wrong page here. Hold on a second. So that's something that, and this is, again, I wrote this over about a 4-day period, so there's a couple of something that the board needs to look at as far as, and maybe a committee, as to what that age limit should be. So 18 years of age or younger, or 21, and I think you'll see 21 in a different place.
Yeah, you did. I'm just questioning, who is at least 3 years younger? I didn't.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. And this is true with criminal sexual conduct cases and other criminal, the criminal code itself. Someone who is at least 3 years older, that sells to someone that's a minor, is in violation, is the answer to that question.
Okay, so for example,
Yep.
if we decided 18 instead of 21,
Right.
so they could, it seems to me they sell to any age. I just don't get why that 3 years younger is in there.
It's because we sometimes have retail establishments where they're just an employee, and it's not really their fault.
I
That's my understanding of why. Yeah.
All right, so then, how did you decide on the 25%?
I didn't decide, I just put that in there as a baseline to see what the county wanted to do. I think I started with 40% and then went down to 25. That could be lower, it could be higher. There is no real reason why I came up with 25%, other than, in my mind, as a county attorney, 25% of any business who is selling water, decorative items that are bongs, that are pipes. If it's 25% of their retail business, I think that's enough that they should be regulated. And that was just as a county attorney, my take on it.
Okay, and then there isn't anywhere listed in here about the definition of location as far as how far away, right? Did I miss that, or, because I thought it had to be so many feet away.
I think when I was drafting the ordinance, and again, the ordinance needs to go to a committee to kind of see where we want to go as a county, or if we want to do this at all. When I drafted it, I believe I said 1 mile from schools.
I thought I saw something in there about that.
I'm just trying to find it. And I'm missing it right now. But I do believe that my ideal was 1 mile from any school, 1 mile from any candy shop. I did not put in this, in the HIP meeting that I had with HIP, as well as one of our commissioners who's not here, Dan. It did come up on whether or not we wanted to do parks, as well as trails, that might be helpful as far as not allowing kids, because at the end of the day, or kids to be near these establishments that are regulated. I think that's the main goal, and it has to be the main goal, which is we're trying to protect children from being able to go in and buy paraphernalia. And that's why licenses are required, and that's why there's some restrictions on where those businesses can be. Not to say that they cannot exist, they just have to not be near places that children go a lot.
The question I had really comes down to how to enforce this.
Sure.
How is intended use going to be determined? Because, you know, any household item can almost be considered paraphernalia if it's used for that purpose.
Sure.
Is it going to stick to the 4 items listed in subdivision 1A1? Should be page 1.
Sure. So we're talking about manufacturing controlled substances, ingesting. Oh, sorry.
So I mean, obviously,
Sure.
if you have a mixing bowl and a spoon, which everybody has in their house, and you're trying to determine intended use, what are going to be the guiding things in this ordinance that make you able to prove its intended use? Is it just
Sure.
those 4 principles?
Sure, it is.
Or is it going to be broader?
But I guess I should back up here a little bit. So Minnesota statute 152 makes it illegal to possess drug paraphernalia. The way that that's defined is it has been used or is being used for controlled substance use. And so this ordinance, instead of making it that it has been used or is being used for controlled substances, says that anything underneath this, which is kits, water, bongs, basically. So it's more expansive than what the state does, but it's also not making it illegal. It's only making it that you have to get a license if you're going to do a retail establishment that has 25% or more of sales. So hopefully that answers your question.
And the rationale behind that is behind medical use, I would assume, so that people that use these substances for medical use can still get access to what they need?
They would still be able to. They're under this ordinance, if the county, would be willing to pass it or look at it, there would still be an opportunity to have a retail establishment here in Hubbard County. And yes, is the short answer. If someone was looking for medical reasons to buy a pipe or buy a bong or whatever the case may be, it would still be possible here in Hubbard County. It just has to meet the regulations that the ordinance says.
One comment, and this follow-up on the AMC meeting of about 3 years ago is all 3 of those commissioners who presented, they, if the state were to approve recreational use of marijuana, is to really push for local control of the use of marijuana.
Sure.
And so, yeah, this ordinance, paraphernalia ordinance would be a good start on that local control, I think.
I appreciate that, and that's kind of what my thought was as well. This is at least the start of making sure that we as a county have control over our retail establishments without saying that you can't do it, but that we still regulate it just like we do with alcohol, just like we do with tobacco. That it's just regulated so that our kids don't, they're not in a bad spot, so.
Just for your information, the way the current proposed legislation is, there is no local control.
We need to talk to our representatives then. Yep.
I think constitutionally, we, as a local government, can still regulate more than the state.
Are there, Jonathan, several other counties or cities that have actually adopted something similar to this that you're aware of?
No. No, this, I drafted on my own.
this is fresh.
Yeah, no, it is fresh.
And I talked with Commissioner Stacy weeks ago about this. Got an email a couple of weeks after that from Shar. Having that advantage, I've talked with a lot of people across the country, or excuse me, the county, and a little bit nervous here. So I want to tell you why I'm opposed to the ordinance.
Sure.
For that reason that David had just stated, that there's no other county in Minnesota that currently has a paraphernalia ordinance. I also look at, back in the 1970s, they talked about legalizing recreational use in Minnesota. Back in the 90s, when Jesse Ventura was governor, it was talked about then. 3 years ago, as Shard mentioned, we had that AMC meeting where we heard people talk about it. I don't think that there is enough support in the legislature to pass it now, and I kind of hope that after November there'll be even less support. And I don't think that, and a lot of the people that I talked to in the county weren't in favor of it. There was some, obviously, and there was a lot too. Some people talked about there's enough government control already. They would like to have government stay out of their lives. I see that the city of Park Rapids drafted an ordinance and yet voted 1-5 not to pass it, and then voted to table it. And that's when I thought that this came about for the county to take over. So I kind of don't like the idea of spending taxpayer dollars and then county time and resources on an ordinance that, as I stated earlier, no other county has an ordinance like this. Also, Minnesota is a T21 state, so by that definition, you can't sell tobacco or tobacco-related products to anyone under 21. So I know that there is a store in town that's in question, and I know that there's been talk about not wanting to sell stuff to children, which I'm definitely in support of that. But I would think that if that store had to basically deny people under the age of 21 access into their store, would probably take care of the sales to people under the age of 21. And also, alcohol is the most used and abused drug in the world. And we don't have an alcohol ordinance, do we?
We do.
Oh, we do?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But, and,
Permitting process.
Yeah, and a licensing process.
and how about tobacco use?
Yes, we do as well.
Because my thought too, and Shar talks about, and I did a lot of research here, which I didn't want to spend my time on this, but since it came forward, and with the email that Shar had sent me, I noticed that there was nobody that was going to be in opposition to this. But then also, like I say, speaking to people, I mean, in all 4 cities, LaPorte, Nevis, Akeley, and here in Park Rapids, and I know a gentleman, a longtime friend of mine in our Ergo Township, people in the Nevis area, and then of course in my district, a lot of people from Hubbard County work in Bemidji and know me. So when we're having conversations about the county, I would just happen to say, hey, what do you think about a paraphernalia ordinance? And a lot of people were like, well, what do we want to get involved in that? We don't even have the stores that sell that. And I said, well, actually, there is one in Park Rapids. And they were like, what, they're on the north end of the township, so they feel that that's a Park Rapids problem. And let's see, check my notes here. Like I say, the Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill, made a lot of what we now have as CBD and stuff like that as legal products. I even read that Delta 8 and Delta 10, if they are under 0.3% of THC, that those are also legal products.
That's not true.
Okay, but that's what I read on the Minnesota Legislature's Office of the Reservoir of Statutes.
Is that under, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Oh,
and
that's
I
okay.
apologize. Was that under 171, chapter 171?
I can't be for sure. I didn't
Okay.
write any numbers down.
Because there is some disagreement on 171, and I think it's 171-741 or 742, that has an exception for some hemp. There's an exception for hemp.
Yeah.
But Delta 8 is illegal, and Delta 9 is definitely illegal. They're both illegal, sorry.
That's okay. That's actually, what I read off the state legislature website talked about if it was under 0.3% of THC. Let's see, and something, I didn't realize that in the 70s, they decriminalized it, which made it a petty misdemeanor if you had under 42.5 grams. I don't know what 42.5 grams looks like, but,
About like that.
Basically, it comes down to the people that I talked with in Hubbard County. And I'm sure I'll probably be getting some emails and some phone calls after today's meeting. But it's like I say, going back to no other county in the state, 87 counties, and none of them have a paraphernalia ordinance. And then going back to being proactive, if the state does happen to make it legal, it's not like they pass a law and the next day it's legal. The state will go through a regulatory process. They'll have recommendations for counties and cities and stuff like that, just as they do with alcohol and tobacco products. And I think that pretty much covers all the bases that I did my research on here. Now, to back up just a little bit, children definitely, drug use is, illegal drug use especially, but in our society, drugs, legal and illegal, are prevalent. You look on TV, commercial breaks, just about every commercial break, there's a pharmaceutical company hawking drugs. The sheriff's department sent out a social media thing where they were with Benadryl, wanting to take a bunch of it and report back on it. And stuff like that. It's and just like with the T21 ordinance, I would recommend it, under the age of 21 myself. But but I go back to if the city of Park Rapids wants to pass an ordinance, this might be a good template for them to use. And I know that you also do work with the city of Park Rapids.
I have a contract, correct.
And like I say, not all drugs are good, not all drugs are bad. And if the state does pass it, like I say, I don't think they will, but I think we will have plenty of time to get ready for it.
Mr. Chair, may I follow?
Sure.
Okay. I was gonna say, I don't know how measurable marijuana is. I don't think it's anywhere near as measurable as alcohol. So if someone is intoxicated,
That's gonna be a problem.
It's a problem. And I haven't been to any of the city meetings, so I don't know, how much response they got from the public, but.
Can I speak to that issue really quickly? Because I think there's a misunderstanding about what the city was doing and what this ordinance is. And I apologize, Tom, but I appreciate it. The city tried to pass an ordinance, or not tried, but put forward an ordinance that made paraphernalia outright illegal. And it was a crime to have it at all. And that paraphernalia was the same as noted in my proposed ordinance. What this ordinance doesn't make it illegal, it just makes it to where any establishment who wants to sell that type of paraphernalia needs to get a license if they're selling more than 25% of that. And I think we talked about that. How do you say that a pipe can be, or a pen, for instance? Walmart can't be in trouble for selling pens, which can be used to smoke methamphetamine. So it's at 25%, but the city's ordinance was not the same as this. The city's ordinance that the city declined to look at was about making it outright illegal. And this is different.
And that's why I would like to at least see this come up as a public meeting, get input from the public. So bring it forward for that, is my thought.
And Ted, this isn't a result, for me, this ordinance is not a result of potentially what will happen at the state level. To me, this is about what currently is legal or illegally as drugs being used, and the sale of it, access to children. And so going along those lines, I would like to hear from Angie, who works all the time with kids, and I'd like to hear from Corey, because he works with drug issues in the county. I would like to hear both of their opinions on whether they think an ordinance is a good idea.
Commissioner? Mr. Chair, can I follow up on Tom's question? I have a follow-up to his comment. You were saying, Jonathan, that possessing under this ordinance isn't illegal.
No.
And selling isn't illegal as long as they're licensed.
Correct.
Okay, so then I'm confused by subdivision 3.
Sure.
General provisions and penalties. Maybe you can explain how this fits in with Minnesota statute, chapter 152, because it says it's unlawful for any person knowingly or intentionally to use or to possess drug paraphernalia or paraphernalia in violation of this section of Minnesota statute, chapter 152. So just being in possession, am I in violation of the ordinance?
You would not be, no. And that's the difference between regulating and 151.72. So I appreciate that question, and that is very important to note that actual possession still would not be a crime unless it was being used or has been used to utilize a controlled substance. So having a pen, for instance, that can be used to smoke methamphetamine would not be unless it has been used or is being used.
So which comes down really to my really only concern with the ordinance. It's not whether we have an ordinance or not have an ordinance. It's strictly defining what that intended use is, not only for the benefit of the rights of the citizens of the county, but also for the benefit of law enforcement to know clearly what their obligations are to prove intent.
Which is, again, why I think it's a really, really good idea, and why my recommendation here at the board today is that the board send this to a committee, set up a committee to write this ordinance in a way that is very clear, that all of our citizens know, that law enforcement knows very well what is and what is not a part of this ordinance. Yes.
Yeah, because if that's not defined very well, it's kind of a little bit of a slippery slope.
Writing laws is, it needs to be very specific. Agreed.
And Commissioner Christensen, relative to your request to hear from Hubbard and Prevention, I think this is the wrong time to do that. Because we haven't gotten, what we're talking about is business regulation and business licensing, and not talking about the impact of the use of drugs in the county right now. I think it's really important to separate those two items. And I think an opportunity, as Jonathan is saying, to kick this over to committee for review and have that conversation there And then when and if it's brought forward as something that the whole board wants to review again, we've worked out some of those kinks. Obviously, as I'm pointing out here, if there is a point in time where we're going to propose a new ordinance, we have to go through a public process related to that. I don't think we're at the point of doing that today. He's bringing it up for initial consideration and for kicking it over to a committee. So I think that relative to the public health issues that are concerned, what we're talking about is business licensing. That we're business regulation, and from that standpoint, it is no different than requiring a license for somebody to sell tobacco or alcohol in the community, because of all of the concerns that Commissioner De La Hunt brought up.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want it to get muddled, because the idea is to propose a business regulation and a business licensing for somebody to sell those products if those products are going to comprise a greater percentage of their business. If it's incidental to the business, we would say that it wouldn't. And we would almost have to say if it's incidental to the business to some degree, then it wouldn't, because every hardware store in town would be subject to this licensing if there isn't a percentage on it. And Walmart would be subject to this licensing if there isn't a percentage on it, simply because it could be used. Not that it is intended to be used, and we can't really determine intent.
And I think that's why, sorry to
Yeah,
jump in,
yeah.
but that's why the state statute is being used or has been used to ingest a controlled substance. That's what the definition is
from the law
from
enforcement
state
side
statute.
of enforcing the use of illegal or illicit drugs.
Yeah.
The presence of these things creates probable cause for investigation,
Yeah.
right? If there isn't probable cause for investigation, then there isn't an issue. But, and I'm not saying we shouldn't hear from the public health standpoint. I don't know that this ordinance is not about public health primarily. It's about business regulation.
It is about, agreed. And the difference between state statute, which is why this ordinance would even remotely be considered, isn't so much that we need to regulate what state statute already regulates, which is a paraphernalia device that is being used or has been used. That is not what this ordinance is about. This ordinance is about retail establishments getting a license to be able to sell bongs, pipes, that type of thing, and being in a place that is not near children. And that is the whole point of this ordinance. Obviously, it's up to the county board to make that call.
And I don't want this forgotten, because when it goes to committee, it needs to be discussed in detail. That's why my concern about that last paragraph is, because if I'm over 21 and I go to a legally licensed paraphernalia shop and buy paraphernalia and then use it, it seems like I'm in violation of the ordinance.
That does need to be addressed to make sure that that's very clear.
And I'm not saying there isn't a time to talk about the public health perspective of this. I think it would be more transparent to advertise that and post that and do that as part of the ongoing process. Today's
So, Mr.
Jonathan's.
Chair, I wasn't asking for a public health synopsis. That's not
Okay.
my point. My point was Ted was saying people in the county don't want this. I was simply asking if Corey or HIP was in support of exploring a license needed for a business that would sell the drug paraphernalia.
And I think I go back to where nobody else who may be in opposition to the ordinance was asked to speak today.
We could ask them to, I guess. But here, Ted, I don't have a problem being first in any county in the state of Minnesota for whatever reason, if I think that there's a substantial positive impact to the public and the public supports it. So I don't have a problem being the first for that.
I would offer one word of caution of being first. You will put a target on your back. And we will put a target on our back if we do this. So if we do this, you all need to be very sure about why and how and specifically what, right? The wording is going to be really important. The public support is going to be really important. Your endorsement is going to be really important, because it will be challenged. If it's a new ordinance regulating a new type of business, it will be challenged. We will have to defend that.
And would
Agreed.
there be legal challenges?
Yes,
sorry?
constitutionally.
Constitutional changes.
Whether or not we have the ability as a county, and I shouldn't, sorry, I was just jumping in here. Whether or not we can regulate items that are otherwise legal to possess. I mean, and at the end of the day, there's a reason why in most college towns, in this state, you can go and buy a bong right now, because it's not illegal to do so. They call them water pipes. They're not paraphernalia under state statute. What this ordinance does is try to regulate where those establishments, these head shops, as defined in the ordinance, where they are. And making sure that they're not near schools, that they're not near parks, that they're not near places where our kids are. And that's the main goal right now. Also noted, I'd like to note if the state in the future, whether or not that's 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, legalizes marijuana, if the county board passes an ordinance that regulates paraphernalia, it would be a good placeholder to move forward on regulation of marijuana, just like we do with alcohol and tobacco.
And when I talked to you, and I don't remember when I talked to Corey about it, where I made the comment where I would like to see the city of Park Rapids do this first, then we as a county could learn from how they worked it.
I appreciate that.
You know, because like I say, if the one store we're talking about is in the city of Park Rapids, is it the responsibility of the county to pass an ordinance and then the county taxpayers' dollars, county resources be spent to address it?
I think Corey can respond to that.
There are, outside of the city limits, there is another shop that does sell this stuff as well, so it's not just confined to the city of Park Rapids. And to clarify the intended use, when my officers stumble across, in a search of a car, or maybe just in plain view inside of a vehicle, a typical light bulb that might be at your house is gonna be looked at way differently than that light bulb with a hole drilled in it, sitting on the console of somebody's vehicle. It's all clouded up, So intended use is, to a trained officer, is very, very clear. Something that you might not even expect. That pen that's in your pocket is gonna be way different than that tube of a pen that's in the console of a car. It's got burnt residue on it. So intended use to an officer gets to be pretty clear. So I wouldn't foresee any of that. But me personally, I am in support of at least sending this to committee for further, review of this, because I think it could, whoever is on that committee should discuss this deeper and have some questions answered and have some input. So I personally am in favor of it going to at least the committee.
Thanks, Corey.
Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Commissioner Christensen's comments earlier about the seminar we were at, I think it was several years ago, but where those other commissioners spoke, and being proactive is important. So I'm not opposed to spending a little bit of the public resource to review this a little more and send it to committee. I think that's a good idea, because this problem, it's not wasted work. Even if you don't adopt it, it's still work that has been done that could come back later and be beneficial for having been done. So I think that's good. And in addition, if we do pass it out of committee to a point where it's looks like something we might want to deal with it, I think we would pass it on to, second opinion on council, to outside counsel that maybe has a lot of experience in this area, to make sure, exactly as Jonathan pointed out, that it's defendable.
Yeah, constitutionally, I think we could kick it to the Attorney General's office to see what their take on it is as well as outside counsel. So yes, I think that's a good idea. I agree.
So how do you decide who's on the committee? Who would be good?
Well, I was just going to ask the commissioners who you wanted on it.
Having established a standing general government committee, which is where I thought I would dump ordinances to that's where I would put it first. Obviously, this is one that's going to come forward to the work session where we have a full, all 5 commissioners are going to have an opinion and want to have an opportunity to have a conversation and have other people present information. But from the first standpoint, I wouldn't create one. I would send it to one of the standing.
Okay. Standing committee. Do we have one that has Corey, not Corey, but, sorry, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus on a committee.
So from the standpoint of the standing committees, the commissioners are assigned 2 each.
Right.
But all of the department heads are available to attend by topic.
Okay, sorry. Understood.
We're not regulated by how many department heads attend a meeting. We're regulated by how many elected officials attend a meeting.
That's fair.
So I would say that board consensus would be to move this to committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be supportive of that.
And then, so you, Jeff, you were talking government, general government first, and then from there?
I would recommend going to general government first, and then we can share that back through the work session as work is proceeding. We can schedule additional work session opportunities where all 5 commissioners have opportunity to work at it. You remember the intention of the standing committees is to do that investigative work and kick things forward, results and conversations and notes from those committees so that everybody has an idea to do that. I would suggest, especially since nobody else has done this process should take whatever amount of time it takes so that we do the due diligence related to it.
Go slow to go fast.
So it doesn't.
I agree with that.
That we would want to do it right rather than do it over. So I would recommend putting to general government, but you guys could make a determination to create an ad hoc if you would prefer.
I'm trying to find my committee list. I can't find what I filed it under. I think Tom's on, is it Tom?
No.
Who's on general government?
Ted and Dave are on general
Dave,
government.
okay.
Are you aware of, Jonathan, any other counties in any other states?
Sure.
That have done something like
So-
this? Maybe do a little dig in there too?
No, and I have. So the background on this, obviously this is the first meeting with the board here. For the county, the city was looking at making it outright illegal to possess a number of items that are otherwise legal. And the city said no. That ordinance was drafted off of an ordinance that was drafted in, I believe it was Moorhead, looked at that ordinance as well. And they also tabled it and waited to see. So while it has not been passed, it's been looked at in a very different way than licensing, as opposed to making it outright illegal. So what this ordinance is has not been looked at statewide at all. But I do need to look at nationally whether or not. There might be some other states that have some counties that have looked at an ordinance.
Colorado and Washington.
Something
who
like that,
has-
yeah.
They're dealing with this.
And I will do that. I have not looked into nationally whether or not that's been done. But it has not been done in the state. I can say that.
Any other further questions?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Jonathan.
Yeah,
You're looking
my
a little,
pleasure.
you are looking a little pale.
I am. I gotta go home and go to bed.
All right. Next on the agenda is redistricting.
And Commissioners, all I wanted to identify there is that, we've got the results of the congressional and representative districts for the state level. We also know that the city is going to carry forward their precincts as they existed for the last 10 years, which means that we will not be able to maintain our current commissioner district lines. So we will have to go through a process of reviewing options and alternatives. We did post a notice as required that the board will be reviewing district possibilities on April 5th, that we'll have that as part of our work session, and we will have on the 12th, and then on the 19th, the board will have to approve, before April 26th, they'll have to approve commissioner districts for the next 10 years. So now it's time for us, now that we know all the moving pieces and all the precincts have been set, well, they'll be set tonight. We know where they're gonna be drawn, we know what they are gonna be, we know what the numbers are we're gonna be working with. Now we can come up with the scenarios that that the board will have to consider. So I would suggest that we throw this out there. And public notice is already going to be in the paper for the next 3 weeks. It's already up on the county website. If people want to submit a plan, they can submit a plan. The board's responsibility is to consider any plan that meets the criteria, right, of, you know what they are, regular, contiguous, and within 10% of the average population by district, or propose your own. So this is the time we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and come up with a couple of plans we want to advance. But this is, now that we have all the data, this is our, we've been waiting, now we have to go. And we have about 3 weeks to make those initial recommendations.
And if I recall correctly, District 2, Shars District, is the only one that's not within 10%?
No, District 1, or District 2 is underpopulated, District 3 is overpopulated.
Oh, okay.
So, and there isn't a, there isn't a really good way just to shift one from the other because we don't have a line we can use. So that is the challenge is 2 is under and 3 is over. So we'll be working on that, but I know individually, commissioners had forwarded me items, you know, when we first got this data back in October, and we'll have to go through and take a look and talk about that and bring something forward. But April 5th and April 12th will be the days that we'll be reviewing options, and on or before April 19th, we'll have to make a determination.
And then and like you say, that information's all available on the website?
The notices and the timing are all up on the website now, and they'll be in the paper the next 3 weeks.
Okay, and then what townships and the districts are right now? Is that information on the website?
The current commissioner district map is on the website.
Okay, but not the populations?
Not the populations.
How will the public get that information if they want to make a proposal?
It's actually available on the Secretary of State website. The same block data is made available by the state that we have access to, so that.
Could that be made clear so that if someone would have wanted to, they could, so that when we start doing it, they can't come back and say, well, gee, I didn't know I could have done this like that.
We did.
As transparent as possible.
Yep, we did have this conversation several months ago, and I asked if the board wanted to spend $4,500 to buy an ESRI component where we could put that on the website and people could actually play with the blocks real time, and the decision was made then not to. And now it might be late to do that, but we can add something to the notice to say where they can get access to the data.
Yeah, maybe at least mention where they can get it.
Yeah, and then I know that we were all given that information too. Alrighty, is there anything else on redistricting? Okay, Assessor's Office, market valuation.
This is a great time for Jamie to walk out the door.
Do you have something you want me to put up on the screen, or do you just?
Jamie has a PowerPoint.
Okay, all right.
Did she send that to you? Maybe. I have a handout, but if she didn't, I think I can find it and email it to you real quick if you want it.
Thank you.
Now, no looking ahead, this is good stuff.
Well, now I have to look
Yeah, I was
ahead.
gonna say,
Oh, well.
actually, this is more of a, get ready for your phones to ring. Jamie, did you send that PowerPoint to Jeff? Oh, I can just do it, that's fine. This communication, sorry, Pat.
Do you have extras?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Just give them to Denise. We don't need to put it up on the screen if everybody has a copy.
I also have some handouts as well. I will get this emailed over to you in 2 seconds.
Thank you.
Oh, not Jeff Gettle, wrong Jeff.
So, we're here today just because we are at the point in our work where we're ready to send out our valuation notices. We're hoping to have our file to our outsourcing company by Friday, possibly Monday. And as we're setting rates, unfortunately, we are not done with those rates. So we,
Jamie, where did you save that? Did you save the PowerPoint?
mailed it to you.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. No, that's okay.
It's okay. I'm sorry. We're kind of scrambling in our office to get all of our work done by Friday, and there's just, we're struggling a little bit, so have to apologize if we weren't completely ready here. And if that PowerPoint doesn't come up, that's not a problem either.
I just have to find, I got 500 emails from Tyler yesterday, so I just have to go through them and figure out where this email is. I apologize, guys.
Okay, so basically what we wanted to talk to you today about is going to be our values that are going to be on our valuation notices. The market, which I'm sure you're very aware of, has been very strong here in Hubbard County, and most of those valuation notices are going to reflect a substantial increase from last year's values to this year's values. And I actually threw together a PowerPoint. Oh, okay. Actually threw together a PowerPoint because the Township Association meeting is going to be held, I think it's like March 21st or something like that. And I have to apologize, it's not completely finished because our rates aren't completely finished yet, but we're just kind of going with what we have. So, just a moment. And also this PowerPoint, I was just going to mention that I'm going to skim over part of this PowerPoint for you guys because I think you have a better understanding of how that tax process works, and I probably don't have to explain everything to you guys, but because this PowerPoint is going to be used at the Township Association meeting, it's probably a little more detailed than what you really need. So anyways, we'll just move on to that second slide. We'll just jump right in. So I have developed a timeline for property taxes payable 2022. Now, this slide actually shows our sales study, which actually happened way back in October of 2019 from September 2020. And those are the values that are being used for taxes payable in 2022. Our valuation date is always January 2nd. That never changes from year to year. And valuation notices were sent out last March, and then we held our local boards, county boards, County Board of Equalization, we held that in June, and then the estimated tax notice was sent out in November. And so then those tax statements are going to be mailed the same time that our valuation notices are being mailed. Kay and I are both trying to get our file ready for the outsourcing company, and we're expecting those to be mailed the 28th, 29th, something to that effect of March. So then the time frame for taxes payable in 2023 is basically the same thing. And I probably don't need to go over that with you guys because you guys are very involved with that process and aware of it. So I'm just going to go into the next slide, and this is where we're going to talk about the current real estate market in Hubbard County. Now, the current real estate market, it's very, very strong right now, as most of you are aware, and it's very, I think a lot of people out there are aware of it just because it's in the news on a regular basis, and people are talking about it and discussing the real estate market. So Hubbard County is experiencing an appreciating market, we have seen unprecedented gains greater than experienced in recent history. Last year, we had over 1,900 properties that sold within Hubbard County, and that's compared to about 1,200 in previous years. So not only are the prices high and very strong, but also the number of sales are also very high. Most properties are selling for their listing price or higher, and a majority are experiencing bidding wars. Plus, the inventory has declined for residential homes and cabins in this area. So now we're going to talk about our 2022 sales ratio. So every year we do that sales ratio study, and every year it's from October 1st to September 30th. When we got our results back from our sales ratio study, our improved residential and seasonal properties off water were at a 75% median ratio. Now keep in mind that we have to be between 90 to 105%. Improved residential seasonal properties on water were at 67%. Bare land properties greater than 34.5 acres were at 70%. So what happens when we are experiencing an appreciating market is the Department of Revenue, in their data and analysis unit, they look at doing trends. And so these time trends must be applied to our sold properties when we're setting values. Now, the time trends, the purpose of time trends is they're adjustments to determine what the sale price would have been if it occurred at the same point in time as the assessment date of January 2nd. So if you look in what I handed out to you, this kind of helps a little bit with trying to understand those time trends. So on the back side of it, we have an example. So think of time trends as kind of I'm sorry, hold on one moment.
I was gonna let you know too, how while she's trying to.
Go ahead.
So time trends, this is like the hardest part to try to wrap your head around. It's the hardest part for us to try to explain to people. Time trends are found because multiple sales sell multiple times within a sales study. So there were a ton of sales that sold twice during this sales period. So then they analyzed that to be like, okay, you sold it. So I bought the property in September, I did nothing to it, and then I sold it in January, and I just sold it for $50,000 more than what I paid for it, and I didn't do anything. Well, when you have one or two of those, it's not quite as big of a deal, but when you have hundreds of sales, and you have several of them that are doing that multiple times throughout a year, like throughout a sales period in a short period of time, then that's where they're trying to equalize this out. Like if you did nothing, it's just time that changed, so that's where these time trends get applied. So when we look at our ratios, it's bad enough that we had to first hit what they actually sold for because we were already low. Then the government or the Department of Revenue has come in statewide and said, here are your time trends for every type of property that there is. Now we have to hit that adjusted sale price. So a property that sold for $120,000 in, let's say, October of 2020, which is the very beginning of that sales study, you now have 14 months of a time trend. So what sold for $120 might now be the adjusted sale price of $185. That $185 is what we have to use as our median ratio. that's really tough. So you're not only, we're already low, but now you have to make up that additional time trended value that they just added on top of it. That is the hardest part to like wrap your head around, because, and we've tried to appeal time trends and they have so much data with them that they're like, there's no way to appeal these. It's, when you have multiple sales selling, it's pretty hard to dispute the facts versus, well, this is what we think it would have sold for. There's several districts in our county that had multiple sales that way. So you're like, you can't really dispute it. But that's the biggest piece of this. That's the hardest part to, time trends are extremely, they still hurt my brain, and I've been working in this office for 8 years. So they're just hard to understand, and they're even harder to try to explain to somebody because it doesn't necessarily make sense.
So when I talk about time trends, I kind of try to have people think about inflation. It's very comparable to inflation. So on this example, on the back of this sheet right here, it shows a sale that sold for $300,000, but because we have time trends, in this example, they're using an appreciated 20% over a year. So it goes from selling in January of 2021, because it has that 20% appreciation, or if you think of it as inflation, that sale that occurred in January and that sold for $300,000, due to the time trend, due to inflation, it's now worth $360,000 because of a 20% time trend. And that's very difficult for some property owners to not only understand, but to accept that their property that they just paid $300,000 for, we're sending them a valuation notice for $360,000. So I just want you guys to kind of be aware of where these values are coming from.
And of course, you know, she's apologizing for the fact that we have a really strong economy and a lot of people had a lot of money to buy properties. But please understand, and this is the hardest thing for people to understand, if their property value increases by 50%, their taxes are not going up 50%.
Correct.
The taxes are set by you when you set the levy, right? And if the value of our housing stock, both residential and seasonal recreational, goes up by 40%, there may be a shift from commercial to residential. Residential may pay a bigger share of that, but if everybody's value goes up the same, and we still certify the same number of taxes or have a modest increase in our taxes, then their taxes aren't gonna go up. As a matter of fact, their tax rate is gonna go down significantly because the overall value of our market is going up. So the really difficult thing is understanding why something would go up that high. I knew that. I bought a house that was valued at $180,000 and paid $80,000 more for that, right? I knew it was gonna kick me in. If they would give me a loan on that, I would be okay. And B, it was gonna catch up. Because that's what happened if you bought anything in the last couple of years in this market. And now everybody's going to see that, but it doesn't calculate to taxes yet. There will be some shift because residential properties are gonna go up higher than the rest of our classifications.
So what's the rationale behind, behind the time trend? It seems to me that if it was a legitimate increase, it would be just caught in the next assessment period, and you wouldn't have this wild swing.
So that's kind of where Maria was talking about, how a property has sold more than once in that study period. If it sold for $100,000 at the very beginning and it sold for $150,000 at the end, the Department of Revenue takes those sales and their their data, tax data and analysis unit, they study all of those, and then they apply those time trends throughout the entire state to.
I'm trying to understand what the rationale of that is, when it would just be caught in the next assessment period if it was sustaining anyhow.
They're trying to be proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah.
And
Well-
they are trying to close in some of the.
They're trying to get to the 90 to 105 in that thing. and
No,
it-
actually, there's three components here. There's gonna be, the county is gonna have to raise an adjustment to get from our percentage of 67% to somewhere in that 90 to 105. We're also gonna have to apply the time trend, and then the state can come through with a market increase, a rate increase on specific types of properties. So there's three different things that come up here. In this case, the time trend is really trying to anticipate that rather than always be in a reactionary market. In much the same way, and the analogy I would use, as we're negotiating contracts for 3 years, we're negotiating with the last 3 years worth of data, but we're not sure what's gonna happen 2 years out. We're making a promise or a guess on the third one. They're doing the same here to try to round that out rather than to go like this.
Yeah, we think
That can work the other way around though, too. I mean,
So-
you can see in this environment that they apply these time trends, and you could see within 18 months, values starting to drop again in sales, depending on where we're headed. And all they've done is create a
So the other
bigger adjustment.
The other component of this is our valuation date is January 2nd of every year. So whatever that property is worth on January 2nd is supposed to be what our value reflects. So if that property sold January of last year, because of that inflation, that time trend, the appreciating market, that house now is valued at January 2nd of 2022. So you're going to have a sale price maybe up to 14 months ago.
Yeah.
And that sale price is not going to reflect what we have it valued at today. So depending on when a property sold, a monthly time trend is applied, and that drives the adjusted sale price. And the adjusted sale price is what is used when we set values. So if something sold 10 months ago at $100,000, we don't use that $100,000. We use the adjusted sale price with the time trend applied when we are developing our values.
So do they do that in a declining market too? Still use the
Yes.
same time?
Yes,
time
they
trend
do.
the same
We can
way?
have a negative time trend, and we've had those in certain areas. This is probably the first year that every facet of everything we've had has had a time trend on it. The
Yeah.
other thing too, to answer your question about like, why wouldn't it just catch up in the next sales study or the next sales period? So if you have a property that sells more than once, like I was talking about, they only use one of those sales as a good sale. You can't have two of the same sold property, they reject one of them as a bad sale and they keep the other one in. So they have to reflect that difference because of that change. So it's not like, well, if we kept all of them in, then I would agree with you that it's going to balance itself out. But because we don't, I shouldn't say we, it's not our decision, but the Department of Revenue says that they're only going to keep one of those sales in the sales study. So, and
Which
it's
I'm
a
assuming is always the higher.
Yeah, it's normally the newest one.
It's the most
They
recent.
always, yeah, it's the most
Okay.
recent sale. They normally don't be like, well, we like this one better.
In today's market, it would be the higher one.
Probably the higher one. So, and it's crazy because then when these sales come in, like our office spends tons of time researching these sales. And it is crazy to me that someone just bought a property, they've done nothing to it, because we'll call and verify and be like, hey, what did you do to it? And they're like, nothing. And it's selling for $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 more than they paid for it less than 6 months ago. That's crazy.
So I also want to show you the slide, this slide, Jeff, where.
Next one.
This one? Yeah. So this is just kind of a map of northwestern Minnesota. And just so you know, Hubbard County is not the only county that is getting time trends. This map illustrates off-water time trends in northwest Minnesota for seasonal and residential properties. We are one of the higher time trends. We're not the highest. Cass County is higher than us. Coochin is higher than us. But we do have some high time trends. But just so you know, this is happening statewide. This isn't just something that Hubbard County is experiencing. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as well. And then the next slide just shows.
You have to go backwards.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I?
There you go.
Oh, yeah, we tweaked it a little bit this morning. Sorry. Sorry about that, Jeff.
That's fine.
Okay, so then, this is just kind of a sample of the time trends that we are seeing. I gave you a full, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages long of all of the townships. So that's just kind of a, showing just a few of them. The monthly time trends and the annual time trends. Some of those annual time trends are very high. We do have some 26, almost 27% time trends. Those are very, very strong time trends. The 21s are still high. And if you look towards the back pages, then that addresses time trends on 34.5 acres or more. So that addresses just the bare land. And so
I'm going to take Arago because that's where I live.
Sure.
The annual trend is 26.7%.
That's on water.
Okay, so are you telling me if a property's on water, they pretty much all, their value, their tax value, not the tax went up, but the tax value went up 26%?
We can,
Based on sales.
based on sales, do you want me just to jump into this?
I'm going to do one more slide, and then I'm going to have Maria.
Okay.
Then I'm going to have Maria jump in and talk about
Rates.
those rates.
Rates and values, yeah.
Did I get a copy of those? Well, that's okay. I'll use the one.
I didn't change anything
Yeah.
on that, so.
So I'm just going to go to this slide right here.
Is that the one we were just on?
One more. There you go. Perfect. All right. All right. So on this one, I actually want to just show you on the very top line that sale price of 173. That actually happened in November of 2020. So now, that was during our sales study period, but it was at the beginning of our sales study period. So that particular sale has 14 months of adjustments. So instead of us using the sale price of 173 when we're calculating our values, we actually have to use the adjusted sale price of 217,252 because of that time trend that has been applied. Because what we're saying, what the Department of Revenue is saying, that even though this sale happened in November of 2022, had that sale happened on January 2nd of it happened of 2020, but had it happened on January 2nd of 2022, when we are supposed to value all of our property for our 2022 assessment, that it would, instead of selling at 173, it would have sold at 217.
So did you use the annual trend of 0.21559 to get to the 217?
It would be a monthly trend. The monthly trend is the 0.016402.
Okay, do you just take that and then you take that times 12?
Times 14 in this case.
Yeah, okay, never mind,
14,
okay.
yeah.
And then, so
They-
why is
they
the
do a-
annual trend in there?
Sometimes for a 5-year study, so they use them differently, so monthly trends, and then they do a 5-year sales
Yeah.
study too, where then those are gonna be yearly, instead of being like, you need to do this for 39 months, they just do an
Yeah.
annual one.
And then sometimes those annual trends are easier for people to kind of understand instead of the monthly.
It's easier to visualize.
It's a visual thing. And then if you go down one more sale, the second one actually happened in September of 2021. So that happened several months or later than the first sale. So that sale only has 4 months of the time adjustment. So you're going to see a larger adjustment for that first sale because it's being adjusted for 14 months as opposed to the second sale that's only being adjusted for 4 months. It just kind of, every sale is different depending on when it happened. So every sale has to be adjusted to our January 2nd, 2022 date. And I'm gonna let Maria take over on some of those rates that we're ending up with.
I'm gonna go over the why do I care and how does this apply to me? So I think the biggest thing I want you guys to just take away from this is that this year was crazy for setting rates. It took myself and Lauren, we've been working on these for 5 or 6 weeks, like, we've had to start over several times because we just weren't able to hit these numbers that we needed to. We tried to stratify more sales, we tried to look at every aspect, instead of just being like, everyone's gonna go up 47%, because then we can just get it at a blanket thing. We also wanted to make sure that our smaller square footage houses were being an equal portion as the large houses. So there was a ton of work and a ton of analysis that went into this. So feel free to ask me questions, but we're just gonna kind of rock and roll through this. So if you look at these colored sheets that I gave you, you have 2 different lists. One is districts that had 6 or more sales, and then one that had districts that had less than 6 sales, okay? So obviously, we all know 6 sales is the magical number for the Department of Revenue. If you have a district or an area that has 6 or more sales, that's when those median ratios have to fall within that 90 and 105%, or the state comes in, slaps us and says, here's a state board order, and it's not, then everyone's not happy, okay? So countywide stuff is up at the top. Kind of went over that a little bit already. So we have 3 different columns though. So the first column, the prelim ratio, these were the ratios that were given to us from the Department of Revenue when we first started setting rates. Now these ratios do take into consideration those sales, those time adjusted sale prices, okay? So this is what we had to work with. We have some that are in the 50s. Like it was ugly starting out. We've never seen values this low before. I've been involved in rate setting a little bit in the past, and like last year, when we were verifying sales this year, you'd get a sale in the 80s and you're like, man, that's really good, because most of our sales were in the 60s and the 50s. Which in other years you're like, ooh, what's wrong with that sale? Like, why are we so low on it? Where now you're like, hey, that's really, that's really good. So anyway, so then the next column, so what we did is right off the bat, we did a county-wide building rate increase of 25%. So what that means, I know, I'm sorry, just go with me here, Tom.
Countywide.
Believe me. Countywide, 25%. So what that means is if your house was valued, the building rate per square foot was $100 for 2022 taxes, it is now $125 for 2023. It's a little more complicated than that because there's a ton of factors, but we're gonna go simple. Was 100, it's now 125, okay? Tried that first, realized that those lower square footage houses, we weren't seeing the impact that we needed to see on those, where the larger square foot houses were getting nailed. So then we had to adjust our sizing factors. So we kind of tried to equalize it out. These ones had a little bit more, these ones had a little bit less, to try to make it so that everyone's seeing an equal share of it. So after the 25% rate increase, the quality factor changes, and the size adjustments that we made, you get to the middle column. Now some districts, after we did that, they were sitting fairly good. The rule that that Lauren and I operated under was, if you get to 91%, technically it is in compliance, but our rates never tend to be 100% what the DOR calculates. The lowest we typically will go is 92, because it gives us that 1% buffer that if we calculated something wrong or we missed something, we're not gonna think we're good, and then all of a sudden a state board order comes in. So most of these, we tweaked a little bit. We'd like to be in that 93 to 94 range, if at all possible, just because it gives us a little bit of wiggle room. We're not trying to hit 100% on a lot of these because of how far we had to come, okay? So that you can see that certain districts were sitting better after those rate increases, and then we get into the individual district rate increases. So right off the bat, everyone's gonna love us, 25% building rate increase, and then we looked at the individual districts. Now, sometimes you have spots where you can decrease areas. That rarely happened this year. We had 2 neighborhoods in Park Rapid City that we did come down a little bit on, but for the most part, everything else, it went up. We can get you more detail, like if you actually wanna know percentages and like what actually increased. I didn't wanna give you guys too much information just because we're trying to keep this level. I know you're going to get phone calls. I will be shocked if you don't. We are going to get phone calls. So I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm not saying you guys have to explain this. That's not your job. I want you just to understand though that the hardest part for us when setting rates this year is we got hit with those huge time trends. And so we had to use, we're already low on sale prices, we're already low on EMVs, and then we got hit with this adjusted sale price. So some districts got hit worse than others. So Arago Township, if you look at yours, Ms. Shar, starting out, we were in 74.2, sorry, when we say aggregate, we mean a combination of on and off water, okay? So aggregately, we had 23 sales, 74.22%, which that tells us right off the bat, we gotta go up, because that's not, we have 6 or more sales, it's not in compliance. So after we did the rate increase, we got to 91.44. When we looked at that, it told us that we were in the right direction. We're heading in the right direction. We were hitting the things that we needed to hit. Then we looked at, is it more land? Is it more building improvements when we get into the actual nitty gritty in the district itself? So once we made some of those adjustments, now because off water had more than 6 sales and on water had more than 6 sales, we also had to be compliant in the 2 components together. So on this, we had to be compliant in all 3 areas of it, where sometimes if there's 1 sale on water, you don't have to be compliant in it, but we still want to look at them. So once we were done with our rate adjustments, you can see what the market rate adjustments were after that. Now, I will say that these rates are based off of these rates will change just slightly. We are now putting all of this information into the new software, and we are finding that they are changing ever so slightly. It's not major, we're talking probably less than 1%. It's normally like just a few decimal places one way or the other once we get those rates in. But we set these out of our old system since we were confident in how we could do it. I'm confident that our rates are gonna be good. We're not gonna get state board orders. And now it's trying to implement them into the new system. So that is what we are working on today and tomorrow, or basically until Thursday. So we know what we need to do. It's just now a matter of getting them into the system, which that's what we're working on. But then if you look at, I don't want to bore you and go through every one of these districts, but it's something that you guys can look at. So if you're like, hey, what happened in certain districts? I can also get you something later if you want me to show you what lakes had the biggest impact. If you want, I can put something together like that. So I know there's certain lakes that got hit pretty hard. Cabacona is one of them, and Long Lake is another one. Their rate increases because of the sales. They had a ton of sales on them. They're going to increase quite a bit. So I can absolutely get that stuff to you if you give me till after Friday when our live file has to go out. I can put together some more information for you if that's something you guys are interested in, just so you have more knowledge when people start calling to ask you what's going on.
Take the Long Lake one.
Okay. Yeah, Long Lake, that's not gonna be fun. But there is rationale, like that's the hardest part where you're like, it felt like we didn't like it, but we have to do it, otherwise the state's gonna come in. So our hands were kind of tied.
I just have a question. I'm looking at Lake George, and they're at the ratio after market adjustments at 100%, and they were at 93.
Yep.
So why did you adjust them?
So when we looked at those, some of those sales, we had to look at different districts. So our philosophy was what we did is we broke it down first, like the district wide. Then we broke it down by neighborhood, so we could see, are we high in some neighborhoods? Are we low in some neighborhoods? Our whole goal in this was try to be as equal as possible, okay? The other thing too is that you have to have some districts be a little bit on the higher end to be able to get a county-wide ratio that's going to work. Because if we're all in the 92s and you got a couple that are a little lower, your ratio is going to be not high enough countywide that we were comfortable with it. Or I'm sorry, that I was comfortable with it. So in Lake George in particular, now we probably could go through when we're putting it into Tyler, we can take a look at it. The one thing that we're finding is on some of these ratios, the new construction didn't get put in correctly, so we're rechecking that because new construction values get deducted out of that. So if that new construction value wasn't deducted out of it, that ratio, it could cause it to go high. We didn't change a lot in Lake George Township after we did the building rate increase. So we can absolutely take a look at it to see if we can come down a little bit on it.
I was just curious.
Sure. And a lot of times, like what our philosophy was is when you look at a district and if we show you our rate sheets, there's so many different facets and factors in it that we then looked at them. So there's certain neighborhoods that had sales, certain neighborhoods didn't have any sales. Well, this is definitely an appreciating market. So because we didn't want there to be, you don't want it to be unequal. So if there weren't any sales, we also saw slight increases in those other neighborhoods to try to balance everything out. You don't want it to be where Long Lake is taking the brunt of everything, but then you have like Boulder Lake and Henrietta as well. Well, we don't want them to see any increase because there was only a couple of sales where they were here. Long Lake's gonna see the bigger hit, but we also wanna bring Boulder up a little bit too, just to match the increasing market. So that, say this happens again next year, then people aren't seeing these crazy increases again, or like that lake didn't see it and now this year it does. So we really tried, there's gonna be some neighborhoods where we didn't have any sales. We did 10% on the lake and we did 5% on the improvements, just to try to even it out.
I have a question. There's a lot of variables that can go into determining the value of an individual home. So if it's being increased by a time trend, it's not taken into any consideration of what this particular home looks like. So if someone thinks they went too high, the only way to question it is to get you guys out through an appeal. That's the only avenue for them?
At this point, the hard part too is that, so, and you have a realtor background, so when you look at properties, it's very easy to analyze the individual characteristics between A and B. We have to look at a mass appraisal. So sometimes the individual pieces of that, we have to look at it more of on a broad spectrum, I guess. So there absolutely is an appeal process if you're like, hey, we didn't know about X, Y, and Z that was in my property. Most of these sales, if the property's sold, our office has been calling on it, we've been sending letters, we've been trying to verify, because we don't want to have maybe some properties where we didn't know there were defects, or we didn't know that there were a ton of improvements, and that's why the sale price was so high compared to our value. We do our best to try to get those out of the sales study so that we're not overly inflating prices based on not knowing that your neighbor just totally gutted his house and it's brand new inside. We didn't know then it sold for $300,000 more than what we had on it. So we try to do our best to try to analyze that stuff. We're human, we're not gonna catch every one of them, and let's be honest, not everyone wants to talk to us when we call them and ask them like to tell me about their sale. They're like, it was ugly, and you know, like people don't really want you to know what's going on there too. But there is absolutely an appeal process that they can come to us.
It might be pretty busy in June. Or
I think
whatever.
local boards will be pretty crazy,
okay.
so I do think that it's gonna, I'm hoping, we did see increases last year too. This is definitely, the market has been crazier this year than it's ever been. There's no houses on the market, which then it starts a bidding war. Like, it doesn't matter what the property is, people are going to pay top dollar for it because there's nothing on the market. I'm hoping that people can recognize that part of it. I think people that have purchased, bought, and sold properties in this sales period will understand it. It's the people that haven't, that are gonna be like, why did my property values go up so much? But I'm hoping that this is, I think everyone, regardless of your work or whatever, you know that the market is crazy right now. You have to know at least a little bit of it, maybe not understanding the full effects. So,
It's very publicized right now,
Yeah.
so I can't imagine most people aren't aware of what's happening in the real estate market.
Right.
But I do question if they understand the extent of the market.
right.
And so,
How's this gonna affect the resorters?
So resorts typically on most lakes have a different neighborhood factor than a residential, just a regular residential. Just because they have typically more building value. Normally it's about 10% less than what the regular residential rates are at. So if a neighborhood is at a 0.9, a resort's gonna be at a 0.8. Now, we did have a resort or two sell, and so as we adjusted these neighborhoods, we did have to increase the resort neighborhoods a little bit. Otherwise, you're talking such a difference between them that didn't seem fair either. So if we increased the one by 15%, the resort also went up by 15% to keep it in line with what normally it would. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that was our thinking, because otherwise if we increase it by 15%, now you have a 25% difference. That's a big difference in an appreciating market. So they're not the same.
Were they affected by the time trend piece?
If they sold, they would have been. So the time trends only apply to sold properties. So there was a resort in, I believe it was in Crow Wing. I've looked at too many sales. I believe it was Crow Wing District though. There was a resort that sold, and so obviously the value, we've had in past years, we've had lots of resorts sell. Seems like that kind of stuff is starting to get more popular again, where people are wanting to do that. But yeah, so there is a difference, but they also are going to see an increase, especially on the lakeshore rate. So lakeshore, there's no differentiation between if it's like just a residential cabin versus a resort. So if there was a $200 front foot rate increase, the resort is gonna feel that. And they might feel it a little higher just because they have more lakeshore. Now, we do have adjustments for that kind of stuff, so hopefully the local is applying those correctly, but the improvements, there is a difference on it, so.
Could you, for the public listening, could you explain, so you have the dates and what each township can come, but you have local board and then open book, and the open book is at the assessor's office. So can you explain, just to the public listening, what's the difference between the local board and the open book?
Biggest, oh, sorry.
So the open book process is just kind of a more informal process. They can come to our office, they can pick up the phone, you know, they can contact us with concerns about their properties. And we just kind of meet with them on a one-on-one basis, and we try to look at their property and see if it needs to be adjusted. So it's just an informal appeals process, whereas the local boards, they actually appeal to a board. They're making their appeal to us, and it's just.
So the townships that do open book, then if there's any adjustment they're appealing, that will come to the county board?
So if they come to our office, make an appeal, and if we reach an agreement on, you know, we listen to their appeal, if the value is lowered or whatever, then if they are satisfied with the adjustment that we have made, then it doesn't go any farther. But if they appeal to us and say, oh, my parcel should have the ag classification, and we look at it and we don't see 10 acres of productive land and we can't change the classification, then they can appeal to the county board for that.
Thank you.
The only other thing I would add to that, the biggest difference between a local board of appeal meeting and an open book meeting is those districts have either given up there are districts that have signed away. They're like, we don't want to hold the local board meeting. We would just rather have them appeal to the county, or they maybe didn't have a trained board member, so it got taken away from the Department of Revenue. So that is the biggest difference between an open book. The meeting, the purpose of the meeting is the same. It's just sometimes the townships willingly give it up or they had it taken away, but the appeals process is the same versus you're just coming and talking to the staff versus appealing at the local level, at the township board.
And I think it's important to state, in case people are listening, that you're required to do either open book or the local board of appeals prior to coming to the county board of appeal, correct?
You're half correct. So if there is a local board of appeal meeting, you have to appeal at the local level first to be able to come to the county board. Open book meetings, you can appeal straight to the county board. We would appreciate it if you would come talk to us first, only so that if we can help you and we can, if there is an error, we can get it fixed prior to that, but open book technically can come straight to the county board.
And I'm assuming Schoolcraft Township, the township I live in, went to open book because we normally don't have anybody show up.
I believe that's what it was, and then I think when Caleb Bessler, right? I think he was moving or something happened, he's like, I'm almost the only one that ever shows up, so I think they talked about it at the board, and they're like, well, and I think a lot of townships didn't realize that if they choose not to hold the meeting, I think a lot of townships believe then that their constituents weren't allowed a chance to appeal. So that's why they kept meeting at Schoolcraft when we just kind of hang out, talk to each other for an hour, and then we move along our merry way. So once they found out that they still have an appeals process, and in some ways it's a little bit more open where they can just come. We have one date that it says there, but we will basically, you can come in any time that you want to. So there are more districts that are like, hey, it's just easier. Let's just let the county deal with it. Then they can still appeal, they can still go to the county board. They just don't physically have to be there. So I think that's kind of why they chose to, yes.
And sometimes too, should they talk to their local assessor?
A lot of times, depending on what their questions are, like if they're like, hey, I have a garage that burned down and maybe we didn't know about it. You can start with a local assessor. A lot of times they probably are gonna have you call us, but a lot of times if I'm talking to an individual and I'm like, man, what you're telling me about your house just does not match what I'm looking at on property records, I'm going to recommend that they talk to the local assessor. So you can do it either way. You can start with them or start with us, and if we can help you, great. If somebody needs to go out and view the property, we will always get the local assessor involved, just because he's the first one that saw it. We're not gonna just make a judgment call on it without physically seeing it with them too. So both numbers are on their valuation notice, so I don't think you don't have to do one before you do the other, I guess, we'll just say it that way. Both are options, so.
So I'm also gonna work with them to come up with a 1 or 2 page summary. I mean, we've got this one that's gonna go out with the market, with their proposed tax, or proposed property values, right?
If that's okay with the board.
I think it generally just explains some of the mechanisms that go along with that, but I kind of also want to work to prepare some general information, and specifically the information that says rising values do not mean rising taxes.
Right.
I want to make sure that I go through and do some work and show a history of the tax classifications and their share of the county tax rate, and show what this shift looks like, so we can actually, and we're not going to estimate taxes at this point in time, but, you know, if somebody's getting a 25% property value increase or 35% property value increase, their logical fear is that their taxes are going to go up that much, and that's not true. When the largest class of taxpayers, of residential taxpayers, all go up that much, their taxes aren't going to go up that much unless we certify that much, and we're not gonna. So I want to prepare some material for that, so you guys have those talking points and can clearly define value versus taxes, and have some of that information. As they mentioned, these valuation sheets, to get them done Friday, Monday, they're going to be out by the end of the month, and I know that when we tripled the water and sewer bill in the city of Mahnomen, I got a call from everybody that got a bill. This may be one of those times where we get a call from just about everybody that gets a statement.
So because the increase in value is so great, pretty much everybody's tax will go up somewhat, even if it's as little as $10.
So if all of the parcels in the county went up 25%, but nothing changed, the balance between all the parcels, nothing changed, nobody's tax would change. But because residential properties are going to go up more than commercial properties, that means that there's going to be a shift of some of the tax levy is going to go from commercial to residential. We don't know what that is, but we can get pretty close to understanding what that is. But just understand that it's not going to be a 35% increase. If they get a 35% value increase, it's not a 35% tax increase. As a matter of fact, their tax rate will probably go down, which shows the disconnect but
It's
in that
hard to-
calculation.
At least a good portion of this is pretty broad,
Right.
which helps.
That's what we're trying to,
Yeah, versus.
I mean, I could have geeked out on you here, but I was like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, let's keep it like at this level.
Yeah.
When
If a
valuations go
particular
up,
class goes up by itself, that's hard.
Right.
There's a shift.
when valuations go up, that increases tax capacity, does it not? And then with more tax capacity, this board could look at that and say, oh, well, we can increase our levy a little bit more because we need more money. So that there's possibility for taxes to go up, depending on what this board does with the budget.
Totally depends on budgets and levies, that's a huge part of it.
That's a completely separate conversation and related items. I will always differentiate between new value increases and market value increases when we're taking a look at tax capacity. Over the past 5 years, when I looked at that information before we did last year's levy, approximately 25% of our tax capacity increase was from new construction. And I think it's completely valid to capture that new construction. I don't know that it serves a good purpose to capture a market adjustment, because then you are just having a tax increase above.
I agree, but the potential is there.
Well, the potential is there for you to set those increases however you would like, but I will always try to present all that information so you have that much going in.
I think that's the other reason we tried to, like I said, we tried to adjust a lot of those other neighborhoods, because we wanted everyone to kind of be equal in this part, instead of it being like, then I feel like you are treating sold properties differently than properties that didn't sell, which yes, you have to do a little bit, but the market is appreciating regardless of if you sold your property or not. The market is appreciating, so.
And I wanted to ask if the sale of the conservation fund lands, how that would affect values in the town, in the county. Because I know when Potlatch sold, I think it averaged like $680 an acre throughout the state. How does that work, you know, a chunk here and a chunk there?
So those are just thrown in with those large tracts of land. So, potlatch sales never used to be included in the sales study because there was a different market at them. They look like they sold 10 to 15% less than a normal 40-acre tract. And up until a couple of years ago, they never allowed potlatch sales in the sales study. So when they did change it, large tracts of land, we were so high on them that we had to decrease our rates pretty substantially. And now we're starting to see that, as you can see on the bare land of larger tracts, we were in the 70s on 28 sales. So we have to increase those. So,
And I think that was just one sale, wasn't it? That Potlatch sold to the Conservation Corps?
Well, they sold 10,400 acres.
They sold a lot.
They did, but it was in one sale though, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So when that happens and it's in one sale, you're only looking at one sales ratio. You're only looking at one sale out of, how many did we have for?
like 28.
Out of 28.
Right.
So when we do our values, we always look at the median. So even though that was one low sale, it's not going to have the effect that you think it would.
And sometimes depending on what the circumstances were, and I could look, I don't know in particular what happened with it, but a lot of times if we know what the intent was on something like that, and we're like, hey, this is why it sold for less, we might try to kick it out because we don't think it's a true indication of what 40 acres of land is selling for in the market.
Okay.
So just because it sold doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna consider it a good sale, which that sounds terrible, but that's a qualified sale, we'll say it that way. And that's the biggest thing is it a true indication of what other larger tracts of land are selling for? If at the end of it, I went to our property tax compliance officer and I told him that, like, hey, we got 28 sales and this one sold for like in the 40s and everything else was in like the 70s and 80s, we probably can kick that one out because it's not typical and here's the data to prove it's not typical. So we can use those numbers to our advantage sometimes too, to take a look at it. So, but yeah, it's one sale. So one sale doesn't make a market, but it can affect it if you now have multiple ones like that, absolutely.
And now, of course, when they go to sell that 10,400 acres over the next few years, those will be smaller sales, I'm sure. Although I know the Department of Natural Resources was talking about just having finding those lands that the Conservation Fund is selling in Hubbard County and making a deal on everything that they want at one time instead of having a sale here and a sale there.
And that
Okay.
would get kicked out just because when you do that, you're like, I'll spend $1 million on 47 properties. It's an allocated sale price. So you're like, we're just gonna divide it. And so a lot of times those they get put in as a reject sale for that reason. When you have multiple parcels like that,
Okay.
sometimes that's the case versus if you can tell me exactly what you paid for each parcel, that's a little bit different, so.
And I also wanted to mention on the PowerPoint that I am going to take to the Township Association, I have an example of a town with 4 houses, and it goes through different scenarios of different budgets and of different, when values are cut by 50% or if they're increased by 50%, and it shows what happens to taxes in those different scenarios. I know that you guys are more aware of what happens with those, so I'm probably not going to go through every one of these because I think we've taken up a lot of your time already, so I apologize for that. But in one of these, it does talk about where markets change at a different pace for different types of properties. And it does show where, like, if you have a seasonal on a lake and that receives like a 20% increase, whereas if you just have a house in town and it receives a 7% increase, it kind of talks about that little bit of shift in taxes. So that is something that I am going to talk to the township members or board members when I go to their township meeting, so they are kind of aware of that as well. And I know you guys already kind of have a good grasp on that, so. Yeah.
I think a key thing to remember when you get the phone calls is that we don't control a lot of this.
Yeah.
We're required to do this by
Yeah.
It's the
state.
result of a strong economy.
Yep.
I mean,
And-
if people want to spend their money in Hubbard County, and there were bidding wars for properties, and you were all aware of that, and they are all aware of that. And this is the natural outcome. The market value, the appraised value are always different things, but they're always chasing each other through that cycle of ups and downs, and it's related to actual sales. So, the important thing is for us to understand what the impact is gonna be on the taxpayer as a result of this, and understand, well, how much of that is, I mean, if you build $1 million house, you're gonna pay more in taxes than if you build a $100,000 house, right? I mean, I think everybody gets that, so,
There are a lot of people that don't like that. and
There are a lot of
that it
people who
should
don't
not
like
be
that.
like
I
that,
know.
but those you can't really argue with.
Where they struggle is when the burden shifts.
Yes.
And that is hard. I have seen shifts for several years. I've seen shifts where hunting land was very popular, and I saw a shift where those values increased more than residential. I've seen shifts in agricultural properties where we went through a time period where they were selling high, and then, the people that own those types of properties, didn't like seeing those shifts. And I've seen it in commercial, and now we're seeing it in residential and on water properties. And those shifts, they happen all the time. You don't like it when it happens to the type of property that you own, but it does happen, and that's just the way the markets are, unfortunately.
Well, the good thing is we kind of picked on every type of group equally, because even egg land, they had a time trend this year, and we've never had that before,
Yeah.
so egg land went up too. So I feel like we are gonna make everyone in Hubbard County happy.
And this one right here shows the time trends throughout the whole state of Minnesota for ag land. So you have that information as well. But we just wanted to thank you for letting us meet with you today. We just wanted to give you a heads up that those valuation notices are going out the end of the month, and it is likely that you will get some phone calls. So we kind of wanted you to be aware of that, and we just wanted to make you aware of what's happening in that market. Even though I'm sure you knew we had a very strong market, it's different when it actually is on paper on those valuation notices.
Jeff, did you say earlier you might insert something with that maybe gives a summary of?
So Jamie was proposing that we put this in with the valuation notices to kind of explain some of the mechanics of an increasing market, an appreciating market. And
There's actually several counties in the state of Minnesota. I didn't make that, I plagiarized it, to be honest, because there's several counties that are actually inserting that in with their valuation notices.
It's a good idea, because anything you can do to give them the information right when they're first getting it,
Right.
Yeah.
be helpful.
So, Mr. Chair, there were a number of townships that are open book versus local. Would it be beneficial, do you think, we have the Straight River Township meeting on the 21st, to have either Jamie or Maria come and talk to the township officers at that time? Or do you think?
I think that's the meeting Jamie was talking
We're
about.
planning on presenting to the HCTA on the 21st.
On the 21st, you already are?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. She was preparing this for them, and she
Yeah.
wanted you to have that information
It's
before they got
not
it.
quite finished, but it's almost
I
there.
thought this was what but you're still gonna show this at the townships, to the local ones you go to also?
No, we're not.
No, you're not,
No.
okay.
A good,
I just
It would take up too
misunderstood.
much time. We would,
Okay.
yeah.
a good suggestion, if you're going to your annual township meeting tonight, is to tell your township supervisors to attend the next Hubbard
Yep.
County Association of Township
And-
meeting to get this information.
And just remember, these are not finalized yet, so, I mean, feel free to you can talk about, don't tell anyone. No, but those ratios at the very end could change slightly. So if you have people that are very much like, this number doesn't match, don't tell them specific numbers yet, because they will change a little bit when we get them into Tyler, so.
Yes.
Thank you, that was very informational.
Yeah, so sorry to kind of dump that on you, but if you have any questions, please feel free to give our office a call, and we'll be happy to try and explain anything to you, so. Thanks.
Jeff, do you have anything more?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. And if nobody else, I guess we're adjourned.
Good. Star, here are the